The obsidian gates of the Vasilios estate were a promise whispered in the darkest hours of the night, a promise of ancient power, untold wealth, and absolute, crushing finality. Elias Vane knew this better than anyone. He stood shivering, not from the cold November air, but from the realization that he had just done the single most idiotic thing any mortal could do in the history of the world. Inside the massive, Gothic courtyard, bathed in the sickly green light of security lamps, was the event of the year, a rare congregation of the hidden world's elite, and at its heart, the centerpiece, Princess Lyra Vasilios. Elias wasn't supposed to be there. He was merely an anonymous, low-level researcher, a mere enthusiast who occasionally dug up forgotten occult texts and documented the shadows he found. Tonight, he was the caterer's assistant's plus one, a black suit blending into the periphery, armed only with a cocktail napkin full of notes and a deep-seated fascination with the creature who now stood regally beneath a sprawling crystal chandelier. He was close enough to smell the faint, metallic aroma of the antique blood rubies adorning her neck and the dark, intoxicating scent of centuries-old sandalwood and raw, lethal power. Princess Lyra was exactly as the legends described, a vision forged from porcelain and nightfall. Her silver-white hair cascaded down armor-plated shoulders, a striking contrast to the deep, predatory red of her eyes that seemed to absorb the light. She wore a gown of rich, heavy black velvet that occasionally revealed the subtle, bat-like structure of her immense, retracted wings, a physical manifestation of her lineage. She was conversing, or rather, issuing a decree, to a group of werewolf pack alphas and minor succubus royalty. Her voice was low, melodic, and possessed the effortless authority of someone who had watched empires rise and fall. Elias leaned back against a marble column, taking a long, shaky sip of his stolen champagne. His handler, a nervous man named Arthur who actually belonged there, was busy trying to convince a Gorgon's assistant that the canapés were gluten-free. This was his chance. He needed one clear photo of Lyra's ancestral sigil, rumored to be etched onto the breastplate beneath her elaborate necklace. He raised his phone, pretending to check the time, zooming the camera to maximum digital distortion. The shot was fuzzy, useless. He sighed, letting his guard drop just for a second. She's flawless, Elias thought, his mind momentarily detached from his mission. An apex predator sculpted by the gods. To be her husband, to stand beside that, what would that even be like? A constant thrill, a lifetime on the edge of a knife. The idea was ludicrous, a desperate fantasy born of the champagne and the overwhelming presence of power. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, the words leaving his lips in a sound that was barely a rustle against the background chatter, a private, ridiculous joke in a deadly serious world. "I wish I could marry her," he whispered, a smile touching his mouth, half mocking his own reckless imagination. He didn't say it to anyone. He said it to the marble column, to the empty space between them, to the ridiculous fantasy he had just constructed. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Lyra Vasilios, who was mid-sentence, explaining in chilling detail why a certain alpha's borders needed to be permanently redefined, stopped. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound. It was a physical pressure that crushed the breath from Elias's lungs and caused the vast assembly of supernatural beings to freeze in place, every head turning slowly towards the small, insignificant human leaning against the column. Elias's blood turned to ice water. He hadn't just thought it, he had said it. And in this realm, where intention and magic were often indistinguishable, he had said it far too close to the object of his fatal whim. Lyra turned her head. It was a slow, deliberate movement like the shifting of tectonic plates. Her luminous red eyes locked onto his, and in that gaze, Elias felt the accumulated weight of 500 years of Coven history, of political assassinations, of blood spilled and power consolidated. She walked towards him. The distance was about 20 feet, but the passage felt like an eternity compressed into 3 heart-stopping seconds. Her gown made no sound on the polished stone floor. She stopped directly in front of him. Elias was a man of average height. She was slightly taller, her presence completely dwarfing his. He could see the intricate, almost spider-silk veins just beneath the skin of her throat. The air around them vibrated with suppressed energy. The gathered demons, witches, and shapeshifters watched with a mixture of horror and fascination, anticipating the swift, clinical execution of the foolish mortal. Elias gripped his phone so hard his knuckles turned white. He had 2 final thoughts. The sigil photo was still blurry and he truly regretted not bringing a clean pair of trousers. Lyra raised a hand, her long, perfectly manicured fingernails tipped in a dark crimson that matched her eyes. She didn't strike him. Instead, she gently touched the edge of his jaw, her touch feather-light, yet carrying the deep, chilling cold of the grave. Her expression was unreadable, a beautiful, frightening mask of indifference. She leaned in, her breath, if she had any, was cool against his ear. "It is a tradition amongst the Vasilios," she murmured, her voice carrying only for him, that a genuine, unbidden wish made in the presence of the princess on the night of the blood moon's descent carries an obligation. Not an obligation for the wisher, but for the princess herself. It is a vow that cannot be broken, for it is older than the Coven. She pulled back, her eyes never leaving his. A small, chilling smile finally curved her perfect lips, revealing the faint, sharp edges of her upper canines. She raised her voice, the sound ringing through the vast hall, cutting through the silence like tempered steel. Every being in the room heard it, and every being instantly knew the rules of the game had fundamentally changed. "Then I accept," Princess Lyra Vasilios declared, her eyes flashing with a wicked mixture of amusement and deadly seriousness. "Mortal. You have asked for my hand in marriage and I shall grant it. You are now bound to me and I, for a time, am bound to your idiotic, fragile heart. Let the preparations begin. I look forward to introducing you to my family, Elias Vane." The hall erupted in a chaos of shocked whispers. Elias, the man who merely studied the shadows, was now staring into the abyss, realizing his whispered joke had just become a terrifying, legally binding death sentence. His name, spoken so softly and yet so powerfully by the vampire princess, sealed his fate. He had wished for a thrilling life on the edge of a knife, and now he was tied to the hilt. The declaration hung in the air, thick and poisonous, like the incense burned during ancient, forgotten rituals. Elias's mind, usually sharp and analytical, was a frantic whirlwind of denial and paralyzing fear. Except, he hadn't asked. He hadn't proposed. He had whispered a drunken, fanciful thought into a marble column. Yet the absolute silence that returned after the initial shock confirmed the horrific truth. Lyra was serious. The Vasilios Coven did not jest, especially not about vows older than recorded history. A hulking figure, a vampire guard draped in black leather and silver chains, detached itself from the wall and moved toward Elias. Lyra merely raised a hand, a subtle, almost dismissive gesture, stopping the guard mid-stride. "He is not to be touched," she commanded, her voice softening slightly, though the threat remained clear. "He is now property of the Vasilios name. Handle him with the reverence appropriate for future royalty, regardless of how fragile he appears." She turned back to Elias, the ghost of that predatory smile still playing on her lips. "Come, Elias Vane. It would be highly impolite for the prospective groom to mingle with the common help after accepting a princess. We have much to discuss: protocols, blood testing, and naturally how we shall manage the unfortunate, yet necessary disposal of any past attachments you may have." Elias couldn't move. He felt a desperate urge to bolt, to smash through the enormous glass doors and disappear into the night, but the sheer number of supernatural eyes tracking his every twitch rooted him to the spot. He was a rabbit caught in the glare of 1,000 headlamps. He swallowed hard, finding a sliver of his usual cynical resolve. "Princess Lyra," he managed, his voice trembling only slightly, "with all due respect, I believe there's been a profound misinterpretation. I was merely commenting on your striking presence. It was a rhetorical statement, a figure of speech. I certainly did not intend a formal contract of marriage." Lyra tilted her head, her silver hair catching the chandelier's light. The effect was terrifyingly beautiful. "Rhetoric? My dear mortal, the ancient vow of the blood moon cares nothing for your human semantics. You spoke a desire aloud in the heart of my domain, and under the rule of the elders, the princess must honor the pledge. To refuse would invite chaos and suggest weakness. Something the Vasilios bloodline does not tolerate. You made the wish, I bear the consequences, for now. Do you understand the simplicity of this transaction, or must I demonstrate the consequences of rejecting the vow?" She didn't wait for his answer. She hooked her arm through his, the grip surprisingly strong yet delicate, like steel wrapped in silk. "Good. Then we proceed." She steered him away from the stunned crowd and toward a discreet side exit flanked by 2 intimidating gargoyle statues. "And please," she added, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "do try to look less like a sacrifice. It cheapens the entire ceremony." The moment they stepped out of the grand ballroom, the atmosphere changed from tense celebration to cold, calculated efficiency. They entered a labyrinth of silent, heavily guarded hallways, the walls lined with portraits of ancestors, all beautiful, pale, and possessing the same unsettling red gaze. Lyra led him into an opulent, library-like office, All dark wood and intimidating shelves filled with leather-bound tomes that smelled of old parchment and dust. She released his arm and moved behind a vast mahogany desk, taking a seat that looked suspiciously like a throne disguised as an office chair. She steepled her fingers, her gaze unwavering. "Elias Vane," she began, dropping the formal address, "let us dispense with the fairy tale. You are not some Prince Charming. You are an insignificant man who stumbled into a massive political necessity. My coven is old, Elias. Too old. The elders have been pushing for my marriage for centuries, demanding consolidation of power through an alliance. My acceptance of your ridiculous wish solves two problems. It fulfills the elder vow and, more importantly, it buys me time. Time to find the real alliance I need, and time to remove the elders who force this archaic nonsense upon me." She leaned forward, her red eyes gleaming. "You are not my husband, you are my shield. My temporary human anchor. Your role is simple. Exist, look suitably mesmerized by my beauty, and remain silent. In return, I will grant you life. A longer, infinitely more thrilling life than you ever deserved, I assure you. But understand this, if you disrupt my plans, if you speak out of turn, or if you attempt to escape, your death will be slow, exquisitely painful, and televised to every coven in the hemisphere. Are we clear?" Elias felt the cold pragmatism of her plan settle over him, replacing sheer panic with a terrifying form of clarity. She wasn't an evil tyrant, she was a brilliant, trapped politician using the first available tool, him, to fight a war she was losing. "Crystal clear, Princess," Elias replied, finding his feet. The fear hadn't gone, but the desire to survive, coupled with the unexpected intellectual challenge, sparked a tiny, reckless fire in his gut. "But if I am to be your shield, I must be a sturdy one. What exactly are the political risks of this marriage? Which elder is most likely to try and eliminate the insignificant mortal before the ceremony? I need names, Lyra. I need intelligence to play this role, or I'll be no use to you at all." His sudden shift from terrified captive to cold analyst surprised her. Lyra's perfect composure cracked for a fleeting instant, a flicker of genuine interest crossing her face. She gave a short, sharp laugh, a sound that held no humor. "Interesting. You have courage, or perhaps just a death wish. Very well, Elias Vane. Perhaps you won't be entirely useless." She opened a drawer and pulled out a heavy, blood-red velvet folder. "The immediate threat is Elder Kale. He believes his own son should be my consort and rules the most powerful financial sectors of the Coven. He will view you as an insult and a weakness. He operates primarily through his network of human brokers, which, coincidentally, is your old hunting ground, isn't it?" Elias Vane, researcher of the forgotten and the weak spots. Elias felt a chill. She knew his background. Every detail. Lyra tapped the file. "Your first official duty as the prospective groom is to live. My second task for you, starting immediately, is to find a way to discredit Kale's human network. Prove they are compromised. Will be a small test. Fail and you are no longer my shield, you are merely a casualty. Succeed and I might actually allow you to survive the wedding night." She rose from her chair, gliding around the desk until she was standing nose to nose with him again. The power radiating from her was immense, a crushing tide. "Now come. The elders require a formal presentation of my betrothed, the man who stole the heart of the Vasilios princess with a whispered vow. We must put on a performance worthy of an eternal dynasty." She took his hand again, and this time, Elias didn't just feel fear. He felt the exhilarating, terrifying realization that his life was no longer his own, but a critical, high-stakes game of political survival against immortal adversaries. He was stepping onto a chessboard where his only piece was his fragile, mortal mind. The formal presentation was a blur of hostile stares and forced courtesies. Elias played the part of the awestruck, slightly overwhelmed mortal fiancé perfectly, relying on his years of observing human, and now supernatural, behavior. He smiled vaguely, offered short, innocuous answers to queries about his ancient lineage, he claimed vague European nobility, and kept his focus firmly fixed on Lyra. She, in turn, was a masterpiece of cold, possessive affection. Her hand, resting lightly on his arm, felt like a warning, not an embrace. Every time Elder Kale, a massive vampire with skin like polished ivory and eyes of liquid gold, fixed his hateful gaze on Elias, Lyra would squeeze his arm just hard enough to remind him of their pact. Once the painful charade was over, Lyra swept Elias away to his temporary residence. A lavish suite adjacent to her own private quarters, accessible only through a retinal scan and 3 layers of magically reinforced doors. It was less a suite and more a gilded cage. Kale will not act rashly, Lyra stated as she dismissed the two enormous gargoyle-like guards outside the doors. She paced the polished floor of the suite, her armor clicking softly. Not while the elder vow is freshly invoked. But he is already testing the perimeter. He sees you as a weak link, a humiliation. And he will exploit your mortality. He already has an advantage, Elias said, leaning against the cold stone windowsill. My mortality and my lack of information. You asked me to target his human network. That's like asking a fish to map the Sahara. I know the general shape of the shadow world, but I don't know the names, the codes, or the vulnerabilities of his specific brokers. Lyra stopped pacing and faced him. Then you will acquire them. My analysts have prepared a starting packet. She retrieved a sleek, black data slate from a hidden compartment in the wall and tossed it onto the vast, silk-covered bed. Kale's most critical human asset is a man named Silas Thorne. He manages Kale's legitimate investments, real estate, tech startups, all of which are conduits for the Coven's illicit funding and influence. Thorne is known for his precision, his obsession with luxury, and his utter contempt for anything outside his control. He is your target. Elias picked up the slate. The files were encrypted with layers of ancient Coven magic, but the human interface was standard. So I need to find the chinks in Thorne's armor. What kind of chinks does a perfectly precise human broker for an immortal vampire usually have? The usual kind, Lyra said with a weary sigh. Greed, ambition, a secret life. Kale's network uses a primary communications hub, an encrypted server housed in a building Thorne owns in the financial district. If you can compromise that hub, you sever the head of his human operation and humiliate Kale publicly. That is your goal. And if I can't hack a magically secured server protected by an obsessive professional criminal? Lyra gave him a look of chilling finality. Then you fail and I will have to decide which is less politically damaging, marrying a failure or disposing of one. Start by familiarizing yourself with the Coven's internal codes on the slate. It's the only way to avoid stepping on a dozen landmines. She turned toward the adjacent door connecting their suites. I have Coven matters to attend to. Do not leave these quarters without my express permission, and do not trust any gifts, servants, or food offered to you by anyone other than my personal retainer, Marek. He is a centuries-old ghoul. His loyalty is absolute and entirely transactional. As she reached the door, Elias spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. Lyra. One question. If I manage to expose Thorne and weaken Kale, what exactly does a successful outcome earn me? Beyond continued survival. She paused, her hand hovering over the silver handle. Her fiery red eyes glanced back, momentarily softened by a shade of something unreadable, perhaps caution. If you succeed, Elias Vane, she said, her voice dropping to a low, powerful register, you will earn my respect. And in this world, mortal, the respect of a Vasilios princess is more valuable than any life insurance policy. She stepped through the door and closed it, leaving Elias alone in the oppressive luxury. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the climate control. He flipped through the data slate. The information on Thorne was extensive but lacked the human element, the leverage. Elias knew that to beat a meticulous man like Thorne, he couldn't use brute force. He needed a psychological opening. He needed to find the one thing Thorne feared losing more than his life. The files detailed Thorne's vast real estate portfolio, his offshore accounts, and his meticulously planned life. But buried deep within a financial audit file, Elias spotted a small anomaly. A recurring high-value transfer every third month to a private, non-profit foundation known as the Seraph's Sanctuary, dedicated to the care of terminally ill children. This didn't fit the profile of the cold, greedy broker. A secret philanthropic streak? Or a very expensive cover story? Elias decided to start there. He couldn't leave the suite, but the estate had world-class security cameras, and he was supposed to be the Coven's prized ornament. He logged into the estate's robust internal network. A network that, to his surprise, used slightly outdated encryption protocols that a careful human hacker could exploit. Lyra had left a door ajar, perhaps intentionally. He spent the next 24 hours deep in the digital shadows, tracing the Seraph's Sanctuary connection. The foundation was legitimate, disturbingly so, and run by a fiercely protective private individual. Elias felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a financial transaction. This was personal. He managed to isolate one key piece of information, a photo subtly blurred and archived in an old newspaper clip detailing the Foundation's annual gala. The image showed Silas Thorne, not in his usual tailored suit, but in casual clothes, smiling widely, holding the hand of a girl with startlingly familiar pale skin and a wispy crown of silver-white hair, the kind that hinted at a rare genetic condition. Elias stared at the image. The girl's face was almost a mirror image of a younger Lyra Vasilios. No, not Lyra, but another member of her bloodline. A human child, possibly a damper, half human, half vampire, or perhaps a rare human relative Lyra had secreted away. Thorn wasn't just Cale's broker. He was protecting something precious and vulnerable linked directly to Lyra's ancient family. This wasn't a chink, this was a gaping hole. Elias had found his leverage. He had the secret life. But now the game was infinitely more dangerous because he realized Lyra might not even know about this child, or if she did, the stakes were now incredibly personal for the princess. His shield just became a weapon with a very sensitive target. Elias had been right about his gilded cage. Lyra's suite was luxurious but entirely isolating. The silence of the Coven estate was heavier than any city noise, constantly pressing in on him, reminding him that the nearest friendly face was 30,000 miles and several decades away. He spent the next few hours formulating his next move, rehearsing the conversation in his head. He knew that the only way to survive was to stop being the passive shield and start being an active, if risky, partner. He used the internal communication panel to send a single cryptic message to Lyra's private terminal. I have the chink in Thorn's armor. It's a silver-haired child. Meet me immediately. This is not for Coven ears. It took precisely 7 minutes for Lyra to appear in his suite, without the need for the connecting door. She materialized from the shadows near the fireplace, an impossible feat of vampire speed and stealth. Her eyes were burning red, a clear sign of displeasure and heightened alarm. Elias Vane, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous, do not ever demand an audience with me like a pet demanding a treat. And what foolishness is this? A child. Thorn's weakness is his greed, not some sentimental human offspring. Elias held up the data slate, displaying the image of Silas Thorn smiling awkwardly next to the pale, silver-haired girl. He kept his expression neutral, masking the pounding of his heart. Princess, I believe your Coven security is overlooking the basics. Look closely at her. The hair, the eyes. She's not just a child. She's a damper, or a human with very specific, very rare genes. She is a mirror image of the Vasilios line's non-vampiric branch. He paused, letting the information sink in. And Thorn isn't protecting her for Cale. He's protecting her from Cale. Cale's network has been siphoning funds from the Seraph's sanctuary, the Foundation ostensibly protecting her, meaning Cale knows she exists and is manipulating Thorn into vulnerability. Lyra moved instantly, snatching the slate from his hand with a blur of motion. She stared at the image, her face a mask of shock and ancient fury. Her fingers tightened around the metal until Elias could hear a faint, distressed groan from the device. Impossible, she whispered, the denial fragile. My younger sister, Ilara, left the Coven over a century ago. She vowed to live a mortal life. She was declared dead. This is a descendant. A threat. A weakness Cale can use to challenge my claim. Elias pressed his advantage. Exactly. If Cale proves there's a human relative of the Vasilios line that is dependent on his human asset, he can frame it as a scandal, proof that the Vasilios blood is weak and easily compromised by mortality. It gives him political ammunition to delay your ascension and push his son forward. Lyra threw the slate onto the bed, the fury in her eyes now mixed with a terrifying, cold resolve. You understand too much, Elias. This changes everything. If Cale attempts to expose or worse, eliminate this child, the resulting chaos would destabilize the Coven for decades. The elders would descend and my position would be forfeit. Which is why you need a genuine partner now, Lyra. Not a shield, but a sword, Elias insisted, stepping closer, meeting her dangerous gaze. My leverage is not that I know this secret, but that I have the skills to exploit the Thorn side of the connection. Thorn's devotion to this girl is the true chink. If we can use his fear for her safety, we can turn him against Cale, forcing him to surrender the entire network's codes. Lyra studied him, the moment thick with the realization that the mortal she had enslaved was now offering her a lifeline that gave him entirely too much power. You propose a betrayal of the highest order, Lyra stated slowly. If this fails, Cale will flay you piece by piece and then burn down the sanctuary just to prove a point. Why risk your life for a political battle that is not yours? Elias allowed a flash of his inherent cynicism to show. Because, Princess, I have been forcibly betrothed to a creature of the night. If you fall, I die. If you succeed, I live. My survival is tied directly to your crown. If I help you secure your rule, I secure my life and maybe, just maybe, I can negotiate for a less permanent arrangement down the line. We are tied together now. Let's make it work. A slow, predatory smile returned to Lyra's lips, but this time, it held a sliver of grudging admiration. A compelling argument, Elias Vane. You play the game well. Very well. We proceed with your plan. We use the child as bait indirectly. But you must never, under any circumstances, allow the child to be harmed. That lineage, however diluted, is still Vasilios. Her safety is paramount. Failure to protect her means immediate, terminal failure for you. Understood, Elias confirmed. I need full access to your resources. Encrypted lines, transport outside the estate, and your best physical operative. Thorn won't break with data alone. He'll break only when he believes his safe house has been compromised. Lyra nodded, the political gears already grinding. You will be given the codes for an encrypted mobile line. I will assign Corvus to you. He is my personal executioner, silent and efficient. He follows my orders, but you will give the tactical instructions. He is your shadow, Elias. Do not mistake him for your friend. She walked back to the fireplace, the shadows welcoming her. Before she vanished completely, she looked at Elias one last time, her eyes piercing the darkness. The first step is always the most dangerous, my dear future husband. Don't disappoint me. And then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and ancient blood rubies. Elias looked down at the data slate, the image of the little girl now his primary weapon. He had survived the Coven's political fire, but now he had to walk through a mortal minefield, with a vampire executioner as his shadow. The transfer out of the Vasilios estate was less of an exit and more of a subtle, practiced vanishing act. Elias was given a simple, nondescript black suit and the encrypted phone. His shadow, Corvus, met him in the underground garage, a vast space housing vehicles that spanned centuries from electric Rolls-Royces to armored vintage tanks. Corvus was a silent, imposing figure, his skin the color of worn granite, his eyes deep-set and expressionless. He wasn't a vampire, but something older, possibly a specialized breed of ghoul, utterly devoid of warmth or empathy. I am Corvus. My orders are simple: protect the asset, obey the princess's consort, and neutralize threats. If you become a threat, the second order is revoked, Corvus stated, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate in Elias's chest. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply opened the door to a black, armored sedan that blended perfectly with the city's high-end traffic. Elias climbed in. Understood, Corvus. You're the muscle, I'm the brain. Our target is Silas Thorn. He owns a private office tower in the financial district, the Apex Tower. As Corvus drove with unsettling precision and speed through the deserted pre-dawn streets, Elias explained his plan. We can't just hack him from the outside. Kale's security will be too robust. We need to compromise Thorn physically, make him believe his sanctuary, the location of the child, is exposed. We need to leverage his fear. How is the sanctuary compromised without direct attack? Corvus asked, his eyes focused entirely on the road. Misdirection, Elias replied, glancing at the city lights blurring past. Thorn's entire life is built on meticulous control. He would have an elaborate, multi-layered security system around the sanctuary. But every strong security system has a tiny, mundane weakness: human complacency. Thorn trusts his security team. We will shatter that trust. The sedan pulled up near the Apex Tower just as the sun was beginning to break, casting the city in a cold, metallic light. The building was a sleek monolith of glass and steel, guarded by high-tech security, not supernatural power. I need you to cause a targeted, non-lethal, high-profile breach of the building's physical security without directly entering Thorn's private floor, Elias instructed. Specifically, the server room on the 10th floor, which handles the tower's general communications. I want a small, highly visible fire, enough to trigger a full evacuation in panic but quickly contained. That will force Thorn to reveal his secure communications hub, which will be separate from the standard network. Corvus simply nodded, his features unchanging. A distraction is insufficient. It must be a display of impossible access. I shall remove the central climate control unit entirely. It is housed on the roof. Impossible is exactly what we need, Elias confirmed, impressed by the grim efficiency. He then pulled out a pair of innocuous-looking glasses. I'll be observing from across the street. These are rigged to intercept the electromagnetic signatures from Thorn's top-floor office. When he realizes the main comms are down, he'll switch to his secure line to check on the sanctuary. That's my window to pinpoint the secure hub signal. Corvus exited the car and vanished into the geometric shadows of the tower's delivery bay. Elias didn't even see him move. He waited, the silence of the city broken only by the distant sounds of traffic. 20 minutes later, the impossible happened. Not a fire, but a massive, sustained thud echoed from the top of the tower. Within seconds, the apex tower's internal alarms began to wail, followed by the shrill sound of arriving fire engines. Then the most telling sign, a large air conditioning unit, easily the size of a small car, came crashing down into an employee parking lot on the far side of the building. The chaos was immediate and overwhelming. Elias quickly put on the glasses. The emergency breach had worked perfectly. He could see a massive surge of encrypted chatter coming from the top floor. Thorn was panicking. As Elias focused the glasses' capture matrix, he noticed a specific low-frequency signal, an extremely secure, proprietary connection, pulsing rapidly. It wasn't routing through the primary server room Corvus had disabled. It was running directly from Thorn's office to an external location. The secure hub. Elias frantically copied the coordinates and the unique frequency signature to the encrypted phone Lyra had provided. Just as the data transfer completed, a sleek, black limousine screeched to a halt right in front of the Apex Tower's main entrance. The door opened and Silas Thorn, impeccably dressed but visibly distressed, practically leaped out, his eyes darting wildly. Thorn didn't look at the chaos he was causing. He stared directly across the street, right at Elias's sedan. Thorn's expression wasn't one of worry for his assets. It was sheer, animalistic terror. He saw the black sedan, he saw the distant, impossible damage, and he knew he was exposed. Before Elias could react, Corvus was back in the driver's seat. He had rematerialized with the speed of a projectile. Thorn has been compromised. We have the data. Next location, Corvus commanded, gunning the engine. The secure hub, Elias gasped, still recovering from the shock of Thorn's direct stare. The signal leads to a forgotten industrial complex by the docks, Warehouse 77. That's where Kale's primary encrypted server must be. Thorn is heading there now to clean up the data trail. Corvus didn't hesitate. The sedan surged into traffic, following Thorn's limo from a distance. Elias realized they had successfully transitioned from political chess to a deadly high-speed hunt. Thorn had seen something in that sedan, something that convinced him he was hunted. He hadn't seen Elias, but he had definitely seen Corvus's cold, inhuman presence as he returned to the car. Elias clutched the phone. He had the coordinates, the motive, and the ruthless backing of a vampire princess. He just had to get to that warehouse before Thorn could destroy the evidence. Evidence that would secure Lyra's power and potentially his own life. The chase was brief, brutal, and silent. Corvus navigated the industrial docks with an almost supernatural understanding of the traffic flow, keeping the black sedan a calculated distance behind Thorn's limo. The air grew heavy with the smell of brine oil and the cold metal of abandoned shipping containers. Warehouse 77 was a colossal, decaying structure, a perfect hiding place for secrets and an ideal killing ground. Thorn's limo squealed to a halt inside the perimeter fence. Thorn himself, followed by two burly, anxious bodyguards, scrambled toward a reinforced side door. He was running on pure fear, his usual meticulously groomed facade entirely gone. He's panicking. That means the server is highly critical, Elias muttered, adrenaline sharpening his focus. Corvus, we going fast. My priority is the server. Your priority is ensuring Thorn doesn't delete the data or escape. Non-lethal if possible, but the data must survive. Corvus parked the sedan abruptly behind a stack of containers and melted into the shadows. Elias, relying only on his speed of thought and the element of surprise, followed. He was acutely aware of his own fragile mortality, an unarmed man walking into a fight with two professional guards, a desperate criminal, and the silent, terrifying presence of Corvus as his only ally. Corvus struck first. He moved not with force but with impossible efficiency. One guard, reaching for his weapon, found his wrist snapped with a sound like a dry twig breaking. The second bodyguard collapsed without a sound, his carotid artery momentarily squeezed into oblivion. Corvus barely spared them a glance, already moving towards Thorn, who had managed to unlock the reinforced door. Thorn, stop now. Elias yelled, stepping into the dim light of the warehouse exterior. Thorn turned, his face contorted in a mask of pure desperation. He had a small, specialized pistol in his hand. Stay back, Vane. You have no idea what you're messing with. Kale will destroy you. Kale's network is already exposed, Thorn. Elias retorted, relying on bluster and the shocking knowledge of the Damnfor child. We know about the Seraph Sanctuary, we know about the child, and we know Kale is using you as a pawn while draining your accounts. You're finished, Thorn. Give me the server access and I can guarantee the child's safety. Fight, and Lyra Vasilios will burn this complex to the ground, with you and your data inside it. The mention of Lyra Vasilios had the intended effect. Thorn's hand trembled, the pistol wavering. The name of the vampire princess was 1,000 times more terrifying than any bullet. He looked past Elias, locking eyes with Corvus, who had stopped just a few feet away, a silent, implacable harbinger of doom. You don't understand, they'll hurt her anyway. Thorn screamed, a mix of panic and utter defeat in his voice. Corvus didn't wait. He moved with a speed that defied human biology, disarming Thorn with a flick of the wrist. The gun skittered across the concrete floor. Corvus secured Thorn's wrists with reinforced zip ties, efficient and merciless. The server, Thorn. Where is it? Elias demanded, pushing aside the fear and focusing entirely on the task. Defeated, Thorn nodded toward a set of large, camouflaged steel doors hidden beneath a tarp. It's behind there. It's magnetically locked. Code 7-4-2-9-1-1. But it's shielded. You can't trace Kale's funds without the primary override sequence. Elias rushed to the heavy doors, punched in the code, and yanked them open. Inside was a small, climate-controlled room, dominated by a blinking, humming server rack, the very heart of Elder Kale's human operation. He plugged the encrypted phone into the server's maintenance port. The screen flickered, displaying lines of code that began to rapidly download all of Kale's illicit transactions, his network of shell companies, and most importantly, his secret communications with other anti-Lyra elders. It's working, Elias breathed, relief flooding him. We have it all. This is enough to ruin Kale and buy Lyra the political leverage she needs. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the main warehouse entrance. The door shuddered violently. Intruders. Not Thorn's men, Corvus stated flatly, instantly drawing a wickedly curved, short blade that seemed to absorb the light. Kale's cleanup crew. They were sent to destroy the data and eliminate Thorn before he could talk. They are coming for the data and the human. How many? Elias asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. 3. Heavily armed. They know exactly where the server room is, Corvus replied. Elias had a choice: stay and risk capture or death for the sake of the download, or retreat. He looked at the download bar. 90% complete. He wouldn't leave now. I need 2 more minutes. Corvus, delay them. Corvus vanished. The next few seconds were a chaotic, terrifying symphony of violence outside the shielded room. The sound of metal slamming against flesh, guttural cries cut short, and the deep, unsettling thud of bodies hitting the ground. Corvus was lethal. He wasn't fighting to subdue, he was fighting to neutralize permanently. At 99%, the steel door to the server room warped inward from a powerful impact. A massive, enraged man, one of Kale's hired human mercenaries, stumbled into the room, blood streaming from a gash on his face. He saw Elias, the server, and roared, raising a heavy assault rifle. Elias didn't move. He kept his finger on the phone screen, his eyes on the downloading progress. 100% complete. The mercenary squeezed the trigger. A flash of granite-gray skin. Corvus had positioned himself between Elias and the mercenary, taking the first burst of bullets directly into his chest. The impact should have torn him apart, but Corvus, despite the gaping holes and the spray of dark blood, didn't even grunt. He took 1 step forward, the curved blade flashing. The fight was over before the mercenary could reload. Corvus, you're hit. Elias cried, horrified. Corvus merely pushed the mercenary's lifeless body off his blade and turned to Elias, his wounds already visibly sealing themselves, though his breathing was heavy. Ghouls regenerate. A temporary inconvenience. The data vein. Elias quickly disconnected the phone. We have it all. Kale's network is in our hands. Then we leave, Corvus commanded, grabbing the zip-tied Thorn by the collar. As they exited the warehouse, leaving the carnage behind, Elias looked at the traumatized Thorn, then at the healing Corvus, and finally down at the small phone in his hand. He hadn't just secured Lyra's political victory. He had walked through a deadly trap and survived, armed with only his wits and Lyra's executioner. The balance of power had shifted. He was no longer just the joke fiancé, he was an operator. The return to the Vasilios estate was quieter but infinitely more tense than the exit. Thorn, now a broken man, was huddled silently in the back seat, zip-tied and covered in dust, the realization of his catastrophic failure sinking in. Corvus drove with the same granite efficiency, his massive frame radiating quiet menace. Elias, sitting shotgun, kept his fingers tightly wrapped around the phone containing Kale's entire illicit network. The data felt heavy, not just with information but with the immediate political power it represented. They re-entered the garage through the same inconspicuous side entrance. Lyra was waiting, standing beneath a single harsh fluorescent light, looking less like a princess and more like the general of a conquering army. She wore a simple, dark tunic, her wings fully retracted but her presence sharp, expectant, and dangerous. Elias stepped out, holding up the phone like a trophy. "Report complete, Princess. Kale's network is exposed. Every transaction, every shell company, every coded communication with his allies, it's all here. We have the leverage to not only neutralize him politically but possibly financially cripple his entire lineage." Lyra did not move, but a flicker of something close to triumph crossed her red eyes as she took in the sight of the phone and the subdued Thorn. She looked past Elias to Corvus, noticing the dark stains on his granite skin and the speed with which the ghoul's wounds were closing. "Corvus, your report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the garage's silence. "Mission objectives achieved. Data secured. Thorn contained. Threat elements neutralized." Vane performed efficiently, demonstrating keen tactical foresight. "Minor tissue damage sustained. Regenerative cycles nominal," Corvus reported in his gravelly monotone. Lyra's attention snapped back to Elias, a new appraisal in her gaze. She walked towards the car and stopped by Thorn's door, looking down at the defeated man. "Silas Thorn," she purred, her voice laced with venom. "You chose a poor master and a worse defense. You will now give Elias the override sequence for the sanctuary's security. You failed Kale, but you still have time to save the child." Thorn looked up, his face pale and wet with unshed tears. "She's all I have left. They promised me protection." "Kale promised?" "Kale promised you nothing but a convenient grave when you outlived your use," Lyra cut him off coldly. "Give Elias the code now, and I guarantee the child's survival and continued protection under the Vasilios name. Refuse, and I will hand you over to Kale's remaining men. They will not be gentle." Thorn broke. He rattled off the complex, multi-layered code for the sanctuary's hidden security system. Elias quickly transcribed it onto the phone. With the code secured, Thorn's utility was officially over. Lyra nodded to Corvus. "Take Thorn. Confine him. He is now a state secret. No one touches him without my direct command. Understand, Corvus?" "Understood, Princess," Corvus replied, hauling the defeated broker out of the car and disappearing into a service elevator. Elias and Lyra were left alone. The political victory felt palpable, an almost physical entity between them. "You have succeeded, Elias Vane," Lyra said, finally allowing herself a small, dangerous smile. "You have bought me months of freedom and inflicted a wound on Kale that will fester for years. I am impressed. I did not believe the mortal would survive the first 24 hours outside the gates." "Your respect, Princess Lyra, is noted," Elias replied, keeping his tone measured. "Now we must use this data to expose Kale before he can formulate a counterattack. And we must address the child, your family." Lyra's smile vanished, replaced by an ancient coldness. "The child is irrelevant to you. She is a complication, a weakness, but now she is my complication. The data is what matters. You will upload the core findings to my secure Coven drive. We will call a convocation of the elders at dawn." Elias hesitated. He held the phone, the source of all her power, in his hand. It was the only leverage he had left. He looked straight into her predatory red eyes. "Before I hand over this victory, Lyra, we need to finalize the terms of our partnership," Elias stated, surprising himself with his own audacity. "I played the spy, I risked my life, and I acquired the key to your throne. I am no longer just the unfortunate human who whispered a wish. The child is not irrelevant, she is my insurance policy. I need a clear, unalterable agreement that upon your consolidation of power, our forced betrothal is dissolved, and I am released, with full protection and a comfortable stipend." The air crackled. Lyra's face contorted with suppressed rage. No mortal dared to bargain with a Vasilios princess after delivering a victory. "You dare to ransom my own victory, Vane?" she hissed, stepping so close Elias could feel the cold emanating from her skin. "I could take that phone from your hand and crush your larynx before your brain registered the pain. You are disposable." "Perhaps," Elias agreed calmly, not backing down an inch. "But you cannot access the elders' votes, Lyra. Only a convocation of the elders can dissolve the Blood Moon Vow, and you need this data to force that meeting and secure the votes. You need me alive to testify to the full scope of Kale's betrayal. And if I die mysteriously before the meeting, the data will be sent to the Elder Council by a timed release. You get the victory, but only if I walk away intact, Lyra. That is my price for the crown." Lyra stared at him, her chest rising and falling slowly. The raw power and fury were overwhelming, but beneath it, Elias saw the flicker of a political calculation. He was right. She needed him, not just for the data but for the optics and the immediate political pressure. Finally, she let out a low, unsettling sigh, a sound of frustrated acceptance. You are a fool, Elias Vane. But a resourceful fool. Very well. A conditional release. Once Kale is formally defeated and the Elder Vow is dissolved, you are free. But until that moment you are still mine. My fiancé, my shield, and my asset. She stepped back, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Now give me the data. We have a dynasty to save. Elias uploaded the files to the secure drive. The political war was won, but the dangerous dance with the Vampire Princess had just begun. He was safe for now, but intimately bound to her fate until the final Elder Convocation. The Vasilios estate was transformed from a place of opulent secrecy into a nerve center of political warfare. Lyra spent the next 2 days in a state of icy, calculated readiness, meticulously reviewing the data Elias had acquired, cross-referencing Kale's compromised human assets with the Coven's internal ledgers. Elias, meanwhile, was under intense scrutiny, not just from the guards but from Lyra herself. He was no longer a pawn. He was a valuable, irritating weapon she had to maintain. One evening, Elias found Lyra in her private library, standing before a massive, three-dimensional holographic display projecting the family tree of the Vasilios line. The branches stretched back over millennia, each name a testament to power and ruthless survival. The Elder Convocation will be called in 48 hours, Lyra said without turning, her voice flat. It is the only time the Blood Moon Vow can be officially addressed and dissolved, or, in your case, confirmed permanently. Elias walked closer, drawn to the display. He found the branch belonging to Alara, Lyra's younger sister, marked with a red, chilling notation, disowned. Mortal life chosen. Status, deceased. The child, Elias stated softly. The descendant. What is her name? And why didn't you try to bring her back into the Coven? Lyra turned, her expression heavy with a sadness that looked alien on her beautiful, lethal face. Her name is Seraphina. The Coven must never know her true identity. Alara chose mortality to escape the politics, the endless thirst, the constant demand for power. She chose to be human. When she left, she begged me to honor her choice, to let her line live in peace, protected but apart. I swore I would. That oath is the last piece of genuine loyalty I have left. Lyra's admission was a crack in her impenetrable armor. Seraphina is not just a political weakness, Elias. She is a living reminder of the life I chose not to have, the freedom I sacrificed for this crown. Kale knew that. He used Thorn not to eliminate her, but to force me to choose between my oath and my throne. And what did you choose? Elias pressed, studying her intently. I chose to secure her safety, indirectly by securing the power to defend her, Lyra admitted, her red eyes burning with a new intensity. The sanctuary codes Thorn gave you, they're genuine. I've had Corvus place a silent, permanent patrol around the facility. She is safe for now. But if the elders learn of a human descendant, they will view it as a gross contamination of the bloodline. She would be hunted and exterminated. Elias realized the true danger of his situation. His survival was not just tied to Lyra's politics, but to Seraphina's secrecy. Then we proceed with absolute precision at the convocation, Elias said, his voice firm, shifting back into the role of Lyra's tactical advisor. We hit Kale with the data, we secure the elders' votes, and we dissolve the vow before Seraphina's existence can be raised. You need to focus on the Elder Council's neutral members, the ones who favor stability over blood purity. Lyra nodded, a brief moment of professional respect passing between them. The convocation is held in the deepest chamber of the estate, the Crypt of Whispers. Only the elders, the princess and the supplicant, that's you, may enter. You must be prepared for the pressure. The crypt amplifies emotion and fear. They will use every psychological tactic to make you crack. She paused, stepping closer, her presence magnetic and overwhelmingly intimate. You need to look the part of a besotted, yet respectable mortal who genuinely won my heart. It must be convincing. No hint of the pragmatic alliance we share. If they believe you are a co-conspirator, they will use that against me, invalidating the vow's requirement for a genuine desire. I've been preparing, Elias replied dryly. But I need one thing from you. Genuine emotional support, not threats. If the elders see a single fissure between us, they will exploit it. For the next 2 days, we are an unbreakable, utterly devoted couple. Lyra's eyes narrowed, but she conceded the point. Agreed. Until the moment the elder vow is dissolved, You have my full, convincing loyalty. We start now." She reached out and instead of a cold clasp, she placed her hand gently on the back of his neck, pulling his face toward hers. Elias froze, expecting a political kiss, a show for an invisible audience. Instead, Lyra looked deeply into his eyes, her gaze complex, a mix of calculation, relief at their shared secret, and the strange, desperate loneliness of an immortal forced into continuous battle. "Remember the risk, Elias Vane," she murmured, her voice losing its royal edge and sounding surprisingly close to genuine warning. "Win this for me and you win your freedom. Fail and you are bound to me eternally as my husband and my first sacrifice." She didn't kiss him. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder for the briefest of moments, a flicker of mortal exhaustion she would never show anyone else. It was a gesture of profound, shocking vulnerability. The most feared vampire in the world was leaning on a simple human for support before the most important meeting of her life. Elias was stunned. He realized then that his affection for the princess was no longer just the product of a drunken wish. He respected her sheer, terrifying will to survive and protect what she loved. He had to win. Not just for his life, but for the fragile stability of her family and the safety of the little silver-haired girl named Serafina. He placed his arm around her, returning the intimate, dangerous gesture. "We will win, Lyra," he whispered back, the words a promise made not just to his own survival but to hers. The air in the crypt of whispers was heavy and cold, smelling faintly of ozone and pulverized marble. It was a vast, circular chamber located deep beneath the Vasilios estate, its only light emanating from 5 eternal, pulsating orbs of blood-red energy floating above 5 thrones carved from ancient black basalt. This was the seat of power where the vampire elders, the oldest, most ruthless members of the Coven, convened. Lyra and Elias stood shoulder to shoulder in the center of the chamber, facing the assembled power. Lyra's face was utterly devoid of emotion, a perfect mask of control and disdain. Elias, meanwhile, allowed a veneer of respectful nervousness to show, but inside, his mind was a whirlwind of tactical readiness. He remembered Lyra's warning, "The crypt amplifies fear." He had to suppress every flicker of doubt. Elder Kale sat on the central throne, his golden eyes narrowed into slits of cold hatred directed solely at Elias. Flanking him were the other 4 elders, 2 who were known Kale loyalists and 2 Elder Rorik and Elder Veda who were the crucial swing votes. They valued stability and political strength over personal vendetta. "Princess Lyra Vasilios," Elder Kale's voice boomed, deep and resonant, amplified by the crypt's acoustics. "You have summoned this convocation under the premise of a necessity to address the ancient Blood Moon Vow, recklessly invoked by this mortal." Kale spat the word mortal like venom. "The council demands clarification. Why should we honor a vow based on the whim of a creature we could extinguish with a thought?" Lyra stepped forward, her silver hair shimmering in the red light. "I remind the council, Elder Kale, that the vow predates even your own life. To dishonor it is to dishonor the foundations of the Coven. I accepted the hand of Elias Vane because his desire was genuine and unbidden, as the vow demands. He showed courage and devotion worthy of a consort." She turned, offering Elias a look of overwhelming, possessive affection, a terrifying performance of love. Elias played his part perfectly. He met Lyra's eyes with a look of deep reverence, a man utterly consumed by his love for the princess. He knew the elders were scrutinizing every micro-expression. Kale slammed a fist on his throne, the sound echoing ominously. "Silence your sentiment, princess. The true reason we are here is your lack of control. This man, Elias Vane, is nothing more than a common spy you used to execute a political hit on a respected elder. I accuse the princess of treasonous deceit and manipulating the vow to secure her own succession by eliminating my network." Lyra turned back to Kale, her mask of composure finally cracking, allowing a calculated wave of righteous fury to show. "A grave accusation, Kale. And I demand you prove it. For if I am accused of deceit, then I charge you with an even greater, more damaging crime. Betrayal of the Coven's financial and political purity for personal greed." The atmosphere chilled further. Lyra motioned to Elias. "Elias Vane, my fiancé, uncovered proof of this elder's corruption during his investigation into the attacks on my person. Present the evidence." Elias stepped forward, the small, mundane phone in his hand looking ridiculously out of place against the ancient stonework. He spoke clearly without faltering. "Elders of the Coven, my mission was to find the source of the recent destabilization. I found it in Elder Kale's network, orchestrated by his human agent, Silas Thorne. The elder has been systematically diverting massive amounts of Coven gold, specifically from the Ancestral Reserve Fund, through a web of human shell companies. Elias projected the data onto the crypt's wall, the numbers and codes swimming across the stone faces of the ancient Vasilios dead. He detailed the transactions, dates, amounts, and the secret communication logs between Kale and Thorn. He laid bare the entire conspiracy, proving that Kale's actions were not merely political maneuvering, but financial fraud and misappropriation of sacred funds. The two swing elders, Rorik and Veda, exchanged horrified glances. Financial purity was the bedrock of the Vasilios power structure. Kale's face was now contorted in absolute murderous rage. What? Fabrications of a human hacker. He is a puppet, a disposable tool. Kale thundered, rising from his throne. He has no knowledge of our ways. I have knowledge of the records, Elder Kale, Elias shot back, his voice hardening with confidence. The records show you have been planning to delay the princess's ascension for years, using the Coven's own funds to buy influence among your allies. Your actions are not loyalty to the bloodline, but an attack on its integrity. Lyra stepped in for the final blow. Elder Kale, your conspiracy has been exposed. Not only have you committed financial treason, but you deliberately used a human network to compromise the Coven's stability, inviting human law enforcement investigation into our affairs. I demand the council vote. Is Elder Kale fit to maintain his seat, and does his treachery invalidate his accusation against me? Elder Rorik spoke first, his voice gravelly and slow. The evidence is overwhelming. Elder Kale's actions show a reckless disregard for the Coven's stability. His accusations against the princess are nullified by his own corruption. Elder Veda quickly followed. We agree. The financial crime is unforgivable. With the swing votes secured, Kale was finished. He stood shaking with fury, his eyes burning with the desire to incinerate Elias where he stood. Lyra turned to the elders, triumph radiating from her. The charge of treason against me is dismissed. I now petition the council to dissolve the Blood Moon Vow. The vow has served its political purpose by exposing treachery and strengthening the Coven. Elias Vane, the mortal who invoked it, has proven his loyalty to the crown, but he is fundamentally human and cannot be my permanent consort. The vote was quick and decisive, 4-1 against Kale. The elders had chosen stability over archaic blood purity rules. Lyra turned to Elias, a genuine, powerful smile touching her lips, a smile of victory and grudging respect. Elias Vane. By the power vested in the Elder Council, the Blood Moon Vow is dissolved. You are free. The tension in the crypt snapped. Elias felt a sudden, dizzying lightness, the weight of eternal danger lifted from his shoulders. He was free. He had faced down the Immortal ruling class and won. But before he could celebrate, Elder Kale screamed a final, desperate challenge, his voice raw with venom. Wait. If you honor ancient vows, princess, you must honor all of them. Ask the mortal about the human child. Ask him about the contamination of the Vasilios bloodline you have hidden in the human world. The sanctuary. Ask him, princess, ask him. The crypt fell silent, the elders looking at Lyra with newfound suspicion. Elias's heart plummeted. Kale had kept one final deadly card. Lyra's expression didn't change, but her red eyes flared with a lethal, icy coldness that threatened to shatter the very air. This was the moment of absolute life-ending danger. The tension in the crypt of whispers was now not just amplified, it was absolute. Kale's revelation hung in the air, damning and undeniable. The elders who had just voted for stability, now looked at Lyra with cold, renewed suspicion. The existence of a human descendant was a threat to the Coven's sacred blood purity, an offense arguably worse than Kale's financial fraud. Princess Lyra Vasilios, Elder Rorik demanded, his voice echoing with renewed authority. Is this truth? Is there a human offshoot of the Vasilios line, a contamination, that you have deliberately hidden and protected? Lyra's eyes, fixed on Kale, were pits of bottomless, ancient hatred. She had lost the battle for her sister's line. But she still had a war to win. She could not deny the child's existence without perjuring herself and ruining her credibility, but to admit it meant immediate deposition and Seraphina's extermination. Elias stepped forward, sensing the exact moment Lyra was cornered. This was his final, unscheduled role, to be the sword that saved her. He had to pivot the narrative from blood purity to the very thing they had just exposed. Kale's treason. Elders, with all due respect, I must interrupt, Elias said, his voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the silence. He directed his gaze not at Lyra but at Kale. The princess did not hide this contamination. Elder Kale did. All eyes snapped to Elias. Lyra looked at him, startled, a silent, complex instruction passing between them. Go on, human. Save us both. When I was tasked with investigating the destabilization of the Coven, Elias continued, speaking with the authority of an expert witness, I discovered the financial network run by Silas Thorne. Thorne wasn't just Cale's asset. He was protecting that child, Seraphina, at the cost of his own life. Elder Cale used the threat of the child's exposure to blackmail Thorne into compliance, making him an instrument of the Elder's treason. Elias turned to Rorik and Veda. The princess, recognizing the extreme danger to an innocent life, secured the child's safety immediately after I exposed Thorne. She used the protection of the Vasilios name to shield the descendant, yes. But why? Because Elder Cale was systematically exploiting the child's existence to compromise the Coven's funds and leadership, proving that Cale values his personal power over the very bloodline you claim to protect. He raised the phone, which still displayed Cale's fraudulent transactions. This is not about blood purity, elders. This is about Cale's gross negligence and emotional blackmail. He exposed a vulnerable member of the line, the very thing he now accuses the princess of, and used her as a pawn to commit financial treason against the Coven. Princess Lyra acted not to conceal contamination, but to contain Cale's destructive, treacherous use of that vulnerability. The swing elders exchanged looks of deep consternation. Elias had successfully reframed the issue. Lyra was not the betrayer, she was the protector who cleaned up Cale's devastating mess. Elder Rorik slowly leaned forward. So, Elder Cale knowingly used a vulnerable descendant of the Vasilios line, an offshoot, to facilitate his financial corruption and destabilize the princess's reign? He did, Lyra confirmed, her voice ringing with finality, seizing the narrative back. He leveraged the child's life to steal from the Ancestral Reserve Fund, elders. You must choose. Do you condemn me for protecting a member of our extended family from a power-mad traitor, or do you condemn the traitor who attempted to use the family's blood to fund his rebellion? The choice was clear. Cale's corruption had already been proven. To accept his last-ditch accusation would mean excusing his treason. Elder Rorik delivered the final verdict. Elder Cale, your financial crimes are established. Your final accusation is deemed a desperate, self-serving attempt to distract from your treachery, further proving your unfitness to sit on this council. By the ancient right of the Coven, you are stripped of your title and your influence. Your assets will be seized, and you will be confined to the south wing for eternal contemplation. Cale let out a guttural scream of pure, incandescent rage, lunging toward Elias. Mortal. You have ruined me. Before Cale could take a single step, two immense, silent guards, appearing from the shadows of the crypt, seized him. Lyra watched, utterly unmoved as the disgraced elder was dragged away, his screams fading into the stone walls. The ordeal was over. Lyra was victorious. Her throne was secured, and the Blood Moon Vow was dissolved. Lyra turned to Elias, her expression complex: triumph, exhaustion, and a strange, powerful respect. The council has recessed. You are officially free, Elias Vane. You may leave the estate now with the terms we agreed upon. Your stipend and lifelong protection are guaranteed. Elias felt the relief rush through him, massive and pure. He was alive. He was free. He had beaten the Immortals at their own game. Thank you, Princess Lyra, Elias said, a genuine smile finally touching his lips. He started to turn towards the exit. Wait. Lyra's voice was softer now, devoid of the political sharpness. Elias paused, looking back. Lyra walked towards him, stopping just inches away. The red light of the crypt bathed her in an intimidating glow, but her eyes held a new, confusing vulnerability. You saved me, Elias. You risked everything for the safety of a child you never knew and for the political victory of a woman who threatened your life daily. She lifted a hand, placing it gently on his cheek. Her touch was cold but not cruel. I granted you freedom. But I have one final question now that the vow is void and the political necessity is gone. She leaned in, her voice a low, melodic whisper, intimate and devastating. I asked you to be my shield. You became my sword. I secured my throne, but the solitude is eternal, and the battles will never cease. What now? Do you truly wish to walk away from this life? From me? Elias looked into her beautiful, dangerous eyes. The life he wished for, the quiet, cynical life of a researcher, was now dull, utterly insignificant compared to the chaos and thrill of standing beside Lyra. He had seen the heart of the Vasilios Coven, and he had secured the chance to negotiate his life on his own terms. He didn't want the crown, but he didn't want the silence either. He wanted the edge of the knife. He wanted her. He reached up, covering her hand with his. Lyra, he said, the old familiarity returning. The vow is dissolved. I am free. But maybe I want to see what happens when the human stays not out of necessity but out of choice. Lyra's breathtaking, genuine smile returned, more dangerous and alluring than any political threat. Then your first free choice is a dangerous one, Elias Vane. And I accept it. The quiet of the Vasilios estate, post-convocation, was deceiving. It was the silence not of peace, but of a predator digesting its kill. Elder Kale was neutralized, but his allies were simmering, and Lyra, now the de facto ruler, faced the daunting task of cleaning up decades of corruption and securing her position permanently. Elias, the former human researcher now willingly residing in the heart of the Coven, found his new role to be far more complex than that of a fiancé. He was now Lyra's Consort-in-Choice, a title that confused and infuriated the few remaining elders in Lyra's conservative court. He had his freedom, yet he chose to stay, a testament to Lyra's strange power and his own acquired taste for danger. Their new arrangement was a delicate dance of power and intimacy. Lyra was the vampire princess, cold, demanding, and constantly immersed in the brutal mechanics of Coven governance. Elias was the human anchor, using his keen analytical mind to filter the complexities of immortal politics and often, simply to remind her of basic human ethics, a concept Lyra found quaint but sometimes strategically useful. One afternoon, Elias entered Lyra's war room, where she was reviewing security schematics. She wore a tailored suit of charcoal gray, radiating authority. The good news, she stated without preamble, her red eyes focused on a projected map, is that Kale's network is fully dismantled. The bad news is that his remaining loyalists, primarily the Moroi bloodline who govern the Eastern Territories, refuse to recognize the validity of the Convocation's ruling and are leveraging the human contamination narrative. They're using Serafina again? Elias asked, moving to stand beside her. They are trying to, Lyra confirmed, her voice laced with ice. They are demanding I present the child to the elders for assessment of future threat. A thinly veiled attempt to force an execution and seize my crown under the pretense of purifying the bloodline. We can't risk it, Elias said instantly. Serafina is safe and we need to keep her that way. We need to cut the head off the Moroi opposition before they gain momentum. Precisely, Lyra agreed, finally looking at him. The Moroi patriarch, Elder Marius, is a traditionalist fool. His weakness is his ambition for his son, Lord Damien, to marry me and merge our power. He is predictable, which is our advantage. Elias realized the true weight of his new role. He wasn't just advising Lyra. He was part of the problem she had to solve, a constant thorn in the side of anyone who wanted her hand or her crown. We need a public, undeniable display of your commitment to stability and power, Elias mused, rubbing his chin. Marius is banking on the Coven believing you are unstable, desperate, and compromised by humanity. We need to show them the opposite. You need a formal ascension ceremony, not just a succession but a full coronation, and I need to be presented not as your husband, but as your chosen, indispensable advisor. Lyra's lip curled slightly. An ascension ceremony hasn't been held in 4 centuries. It is an archaic, tedious affair. It's also an absolute power play, Elias countered. It forces every major house to attend and swear allegiance publicly. And it gives you the stage to utterly humiliate Marius. Lyra smiled, a slow, predatory expression that Elias was growing disturbingly fond of. And how, exactly, does my human advisor suggest I humiliate a centuries-old elder at my own coronation? We addressed the contamination head-on, Lyra. Not with Serafina but with me, Elias explained. Marius views me as your ultimate shame. You use me to show them that being tethered to a human is not a weakness, but a strength, proof that your rule is modern, flexible, and powerful enough to incorporate the entire supernatural world. You show them that I am not replacing a vampire consort. I am replacing the concept of a required consort. You are strong enough to rule alone, with only your chosen human strategist beside you. Lyra walked around the desk, stopping right in front of him. A bold concept, Vane. But Elder Marius is deeply entrenched in the old ways. He will bring a challenge, a physical, lethal challenge, to disrupt the ascension. He must be expecting that by bringing me out into the open, he forces my hand. Then we prepare for it. We use the one advantage we have, Corvus, Elias stated. If Marius brings a challenge, Corvus, acting as your official royal executioner, neutralizes it with extreme prejudice. A clear, decisive display of power under your command. This will be a coronation and a decapitation of the opposition, all in one night. Lyra reached out, her hand resting against his chest, right over his heart, a strange, possessive gesture she had adopted since he chose to stay. You think like a predator, Elias Vane. I find it intensely gratifying. Very well. We shall stage an ascension ceremony. Send word to Marek. Preparations are to begin immediately. And find me a gown worthy of a queen. Elias felt a surge of nervous exhilaration. He had traded his quiet life for constant, spectacular danger. Just one more thing, Lyra. Since I am to be your public strength, I need to know you trust my safety completely, Elias said, meeting her eyes. Lyra's grip tightened briefly. Corvus will be your literal shadow that night. And if anyone manages to bypass him and touch a hair on your human head, I will personally flay their entire bloodline. That is my promise, Elias. Is that sufficient trust? More than sufficient, Elias replied, the thrill of her dark devotion confirming his reckless choice. The gears of the Vasilios Coven began to turn once more, preparing for an ascension ceremony that would redefine vampire politics and either secure Lyra's throne or lead to a bloodbath. The Vasilios estate buzzed with activity, a dark, hurried energy dedicated to the ascension ceremony. Ghouls polished ancient silver, minor nobility arrived from distant territories, their movements a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled contempt for the human at the princess's side. Lyra was consumed by political strategy, but she kept Elias close, not just for tactical advice, but for the grounding presence he offered amid the immortal madness. Elias was given the key to Lyra's private archives, a dizzying collection of Coven history, political treaties and assassination records, to prepare his final strategic brief. He worked relentlessly, understanding that his performance at the ceremony needed to be flawless to cement Lyra's power and his own precarious position. His quiet preparation was interrupted late one evening by the arrival of Lord Damien Moroi, Elder Marius's ambitious, arrogant son. Damien was everything Elias was not. Centuries old, impossibly handsome with a theatrical cascade of black hair, and radiating an effortless, sneering contempt for all things mortal. He arrived at Elias's suite unannounced, flanked by 2 Moroi guards. The princess is busy finalizing her regalia, so I thought I'd pay a courtesy call on the little pet she's acquired, Damien drawled, his voice silky and laced with danger. He dismissed his guards with a flick of his wrist, stepping inside and regarding Elias's modest human workspace with blatant disgust. Elias remained seated at the desk, deliberately calm. Lord Damien, your presence here is a breach of protocol. I am the princess's advisor. Your grievance is with her, not me. Damien laughed, a dry, unpleasant sound. Grievance? No. I merely came to offer a friendly word of advice. You've convinced yourself you're an asset, Vane. You're a temporary amusement. A shiny distraction Lyra used to dispose of Kale. But the Moroi bloodline does not tolerate contamination. We believe in purity. My father, Elder Marius, will formally challenge the princess's right to rule at the Ascension based on your continued presence. He leaned closer, his vampire senses undoubtedly picking up the frantic beat of Elias's heart. You see, Vane, Lyra needs to consolidate power, and the elders need her to produce an heir. A strong, pure-blooded heir. You can't give her that. I can. You are an insurmountable obstacle to stability. Stability based on archaic rules and outdated genetics, Elias countered, finally rising to meet Damien's gaze. Lyra has shown the Coven that the old ways breed corruption, not strength. Kale's treason proved that. My value is that I think outside the immortal echo chamber. I provide clarity where your politics provide only endless shadow boxing. Damien's smile tightened, the threat becoming sharper. Noble words. But here's the reality. At the Ascension, my father will present a formal challenge, demanding Lyra prove her commitment to the Coven's future by publicly disposing of the human weakness. That means you. Lyra can either execute you and gain the Moroi's unwavering loyalty, or she can protect you and plunge the Coven into civil war. Which choice do you think a shrewd politician will make, Vane? He circled Elias slowly, like a snake preparing to strike. Lyra is powerful, but she is pragmatic. She will choose the throne. And when she does, I will be the one standing where you are, preparing to unify the territories with her. You will be a smear on the marble floor. Consider leaving Vane. No. Before the blood is spilled. Elias met his stare, refusing to show fear. You assume Lyra is predictable, Damien. You assume her loyalty to the throne outweighs her loyalty to her promises. You're making the same mistake Kale made, underestimating her intelligence and, more importantly, her willingness to break the rules. Then let's make a small wager, mortal, Damien purred, his eyes flashing momentarily. He took a heavy antique signet ring, a Moroi heirloom, from his finger and dropped it onto Elias's desk. Keep this as a reminder. If Lyra chooses you, I'll allow you to keep the ring. If she chooses the Coven and my family, I will retrieve this ring from your cold, lifeless throat. Either way, I'll see you at the ceremony, Vane. Damien turned and vanished as quickly and silently as he had arrived, leaving behind the chilling scent of expensive cologne and ancient malice. Elias walked to the desk, staring at the ring. The message was clear. At the Ascension he would be the sacrificial lamb. He had secured Lyra's freedom, and now she would have to secure his life against the combined might of her own court. He immediately contacted Lyra. When she arrived, she found him standing by the window, the Moroi ring heavy in his palm. Lyra took the ring, examining the Moroi crest, a coiled serpent intertwined with a scepter. Marius sent his attack dog. He is terrified. Good. He's not just testing Lyra. He's issuing an ultimatum, Elias said, recounting Damien's threats. He is certain that you will choose the political peace he offers over the inconvenient human. He believes he has you trapped. Kill me and marry Damien, or protect me and start a civil war. Lyra's eyes flashed with fierce, possessive anger, not at Elias but at Damien's arrogance. She crushed the Moroi ring in her hand, the sound of shattering metal barely audible. Elder Marius believes the Vasilios Coven is desperate, she hissed, letting the pulverized metal dust fall to the floor. He believes my weakness is my need for an heir. We will show him the Vasilios bloodline requires neither his son nor his approval. We will show him that my choice is my only necessary power. Lyra reached for Elias, pulling him into a hard, non-romantic embrace, a fusion of shared danger and political unity. Marius and Damien will get their challenge, Elias. But they won't get their answer. They will get their punishment. You just have to stand still and look suitably devoted while I break their entire lineage for daring to threaten what is mine. The Ascension ceremony was held in the Vasilios Grand Hall, a space usually reserved for the Coven's darkest rituals, now transformed into a breathtaking display of power and ancient wealth. Thousands of flickering plasma flames illuminated the space, casting long, menacing shadows across the assembly of supernatural elite. Every major bloodline, from the ancient Lycans to the elusive witches of the Vale, was represented. The atmosphere was a volatile mix of reverence, fear, and barely contained hostility directed at the unassuming human standing near the throne. Elias Vane stood at the foot of the dais, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that made him look sober and serious amid the shimmering medieval splendor of the Immortals. He was acutely aware of the countless vampire eyes, cold and assessing, fixed upon him. He was the anomaly, the disruption, the ultimate insult to the concept of purity. Corvus, his assigned shadow and protector, was a silent sentinel standing guard behind him, his granite features utterly impassive. A hush fell as Princess Lyra Vasilios made her entrance. She was not merely dressed, she was armored in majesty. Her gown was made of deep crimson silk interwoven with actual silver plate mail across the shoulders and bodice, a blend of queen and warrior. A tiara of black diamond filigree sat upon her silver hair, and her expression was one of absolute, unyielding dominance. She didn't walk to the throne, she ascended it. The ceremony began with archaic vows and blood oaths, all meaningless formalities until the crucial moment, the presentation of the consort. Let the Coven hear the decree. Lyra's voice resonated through the hall, amplified by subtle Coven magic. The Vasilios bloodline requires no external alliance, no male consort to secure its future. The strength of the throne is the intelligence and control of its ruler. However, the ruler requires trusted counsel. She gestured to Elias. Behold, Elias Vane, the mortal who exposed the treason of Elder Kale and saved the Coven from financial ruin. He is not my husband. He is my chosen consort-in-choice, my chief advisor, and a testament that this dynasty will now embrace intellect and adaptability over tired, ancient blood. His safety is my priority, his counsel my command. The declaration was met with a low, collective murmur of disbelief and outrage. This was Lyra's humiliation of tradition. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the hall. Elder Marius Moroi, a giant of a vampire with a heavy fur-trimmed cloak and a face contorted by fury, stepped forward, dragging his arrogant son, Lord Damien, into the spotlight. This is blasphemy, Princess. Marius roared. You insult the elders, you insult the blood, and you mock the future of this Coven. Your rule is weakened by this mortal, this contamination you elevate. We will not stand for it. I demand the trial of proof. Let the mortal prove his worth, or let him be executed for his audacity. The trial of proof was a near-mythical challenge, A lethal test of combat between the accused and the challenger's champion, usually to the death. The entire hall leaned forward in anticipation. Lyra remained seated, utterly composed. Elder Marius, you forfeited the right to demand a trial when your own house was implicated in Kale's conspiracy. Your challenge is denied. Then I present my son, Damien, as the formal challenger for the hand of the Vasilios princess. Marius shrieked, pushing Damien forward. If he defeats this human, the princess must choose purity over pollution. And if the mortal wins, we will accept your modern rule. Damien stepped out, drawing a thin silver-bladed rapier that shimmered under the plasma light. He smiled cruelly at Elias. Choose, princess. Your mortal pet or a champion worthy of the blood. Let me spare you the civil war and dispose of your mistake. Lyra finally rose, her eyes glowing with lethal intent, a terrifying display of power. She did not look at Elias, she looked straight at Damien. I choose neither of your barbaric options, Elder Marius. The era of proving worth through pointless bloodshed is over. But you require proof of strength? Very well. Lyra raised her hand, a gesture of command that froze the entire assembly. My consort-in-choice, Elias Vane, is a strategist, not a mercenary. He is not a combatant. She paused, her voice dripping with possessive menace. But his protection is absolute. If you demand a trial of proof, then you will face my champion, the embodiment of my will and my power. Lyra did not motion to a legendary warrior. She turned, her gaze locking onto the silent, imposing figure behind Elias. Corvus. Lyra commanded, the name echoing like a death knell. You are the sword of the Vasilios throne. I want the Moroi bloodline's challenge neutralized. Not defeated. Neutralized. And I want a display of power that ensures no other house dares to question the purity of my rule, or the authority of my choices, ever again. Corvus stepped forward, gliding past Elias. He was the perfect executioner, inhuman, silent, and terrifyingly efficient. Damien's confident sneer faltered as he finally saw the true brutal nature of the ghoul assigned to Elias. Corvus drew his wickedly curved, short blade, the same one that had dealt with Kale's mercenaries, and slowly advanced toward the arrogantly posed Lord Damien Moroi. Elias felt a cold calm settle over him. He was safe. Lyra had chosen him, and now she was teaching the Coven a brutal lesson in loyalty and power. The Moroi had asked for a fight, but Lyra was giving them an execution that would be whispered about for centuries. Lord Damien Moroi's confident sneer froze as he registered the switch. He had prepared to duel a clumsy mortal. Instead he faced Corvus, the silent executioner, whose gray skin and unervingly still demeanor screamed of centuries of killing experience. You bring a ghoul to a noble trial, princess? Damien spat, attempting to recover his bravado. This is an insult. This is my will, Elder Marius, Lyra corrected him, her voice lethal. And my will is absolute. You challenged my choice, you face my champion. The challenge stands. Fight. Corvus did not wait for a formal beginning. He moved with a speed that defied his massive frame, closing the distance between himself and Damien in a single blurring stride. Damien, an ancient and accomplished swordsman, reacted instantly, his silver rapier a flash of light aimed at Corvus's throat. The duel was less a fight and more a terrifying demonstration of mismatched power. Damien was graceful, utilizing the lightning speed and intricate footwork of his vampire lineage. He was fast, but Corvus was faster. The ghoul blocked the rapier not with his own blade, but with the heavily plated vambrace on his forearm. The silver steel clanged uselessly against the bone-like armor. Corvus fought without emotion, his curved blade a terrifying extension of Lyra's command. He didn't aim for the kill, he aimed for humiliation and complete neutralization as ordered. Damien danced back, his movements becoming increasingly desperate as he realized his speed was insufficient, and his blade, even silver, could barely scratch the ghoul's hide. You cannot win, ghoul. I am Moroi blood. Damien hissed, lunging forward with a flurry of strikes designed to find a chink in the ghoul's armor. Corvus merely caught Damien's sword arm with his free hand. The ghoul's grip was instant and absolute, a clamp of granite. Damien cried out, not in pain, but in horror as he felt the bones in his forearm grate against the ghoul's immense strength. Corvus effortlessly twisted the rapier from Damien's grasp and flung it clattering across the marble floor. Now unarmed and exposed, Damien reverted to his natural vampire strength, swinging a powerful blow aimed at Corvus's head. The ghoul didn't flinch. He used the opportunity not to dodge but to complete his objective. With a swift, surgical motion, Corvus used his curved blade not to pierce Damien's heart, but to sever the tendons in both of Damien's legs. The vampire's knees buckled instantly, and he collapsed onto the marble floor with a pathetic, gasping sound. He was alive but utterly immobilized and helpless. The grand hall was dead silent. The assembly of the supernatural elite stared at the paralyzed, defeated scion of the Moroi house. Lyra had asked for neutralization, and Corvus had delivered a brutal, visible statement. Defiance against the Vasilios throne results in total incapacitation. Corvus then performed the final, chilling act of the performance. He retrieved the silver rapier, knelt over the defeated Damien, and snapped the blade across his knee, tossing the useless pieces onto Damien's chest. He then returned to his post behind Elias Vane, his expression unchanging, as if he had merely moved a piece of furniture. Elder Marius, watching his heir completely destroyed and humiliated, was shaking with impotent rage and fear. Lyra rose from the throne, radiating the triumphant power of a true queen. She looked down at the disgraced father and son. Elder Marius, Lyra's voice was cold and clear, ringing through the hall. Your challenge has been met. Your champion is neutralized. Your attempt to disrupt this ascension has failed. This is the fate of all who question the strength of the Vasilios line or the authority of my choices. She looked pointedly at Elias. Elias Vane remains my consort-in-choice. His counsel will guide my reign. Any further challenge against him will be considered an act of war against the Vasilios throne itself. The swing elders Rorik and Veda quickly stepped forward, bowing low. We swear fealty to Princess Lyra Vasilios. Her rule is secure. The ascension is consecrated. With that, the Moroi opposition was politically dead. Their challenge had secured Lyra's position forever. They were a vivid, broken example of what happens to those who rely on outdated claims of blood purity. Lyra sat back on the throne, finally allowing a small, calculating smile of victory to grace her lips. She had destroyed her opponent without lifting a finger, using her human advisor as the trigger and her ghoul executioner as the final argument. Later that evening, after the last of the terrified guests had departed, Elias stood in Lyra's private quarters, the silence heavy but satisfying. That was brutal, Lyra, Elias said, leaning against the doorway. Damien is crippled. Marius is ruined. Brutality is clarity, Elias, Lyra replied, removing her heavy, ceremonial tiara. She looked exhausted but utterly victorious. They needed to see that the human was not my weakness but the trigger for my power. You're safe. The throne is secure. She walked over to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. You stood your ground, Vane. You did not flinch when Damien threatened your life, and you did not flinch when Corvus fought for it. You truly are the strongest mortal I have ever encountered. Lyra leaned in, her gaze intense. The political battle is won, but the true alliance is now cemented. You chose to stay. You faced death for me. What is your next move, Elias Vane? Now that you have everything you could possibly want, and your life is tied to mine by choice not by vow? Elias looked at the beautiful, dangerous queen before him. My next move, Lyra, is to help you build the empire this coven should have been all along. And perhaps, he whispered, a smile touching his lips, my next move is to find out what the most powerful vampire princess in the world does when the wars are finally over. Lyra smiled back, a genuine, possessive expression that sent a thrill down Elias's spine. That, Elias Vane, she murmured, pulling him closer, is a question I look forward to answering for an eternity. The weeks following the ascension were a period of deceptive peace. Lyra solidified her internal position, replacing Kale's and Marius's loyalists with her own carefully chosen vassals. The coven was unified, but the supernatural world outside the estate's magically shielded walls was taking notice. The ascension of a powerful, modern princess, one advised by Immortal, was viewed by many ancient houses as an opportunity to test the new leadership. The first challenge came, predictably, from the largest, most volatile neighboring territory, the Silverfang pack ruled by the Alpha Kirin Thorn, no relation to Silas Thorn. The werewolves, notoriously territorial and despising vampire centralized authority, saw Lyra's restructuring as weakness. Elias was in Lyra's private office, reviewing an intricate security matrix that mapped the coven's external defenses. He felt the shift in tension the moment Lyra entered the room. Her energy was coiled, predatory, and focused entirely on the conflict. The werewolves have begun incursions, Lyra stated, dropping a scroll of ancient, blood-stained parchment onto the desk. Minor skirmishes at the northern border, targeting our human assets and trade routes. They are testing our resolve, Elias. Kirin Thorn is known for his aggression, Elias noted, tapping the map. He believes strength is measured by raw power. Your quick, decisive handling of Kale and Marius didn't impress him. It merely confirmed you prioritize political games over physical dominance. He wants a spectacle. And I refuse to waste Vasilios' blood on a barbaric spectacle, Lyra countered, her red eyes gleaming. I need a solution that is decisive, embarrassing to Thorn, and does not require a frontal assault. He wants to drag you into a territory war, forcing you to reveal your full military strength, which would weaken your internal control, Elias summarized. We need to hit him where his pride and organization are weakest. Elias picked up the scroll. What is this? A document from the first treaty, Lyra explained. It details the ancient boundary laws. There is an annual summit, the Midnight Council, held by the neutral which covens to enforce those old laws. It's mandatory for all major powers. Thorn will be there. And he will be planning his next move. A neutral ground with observers, Elias mused. That's perfect. We can't beat him on raw strength, but we can outmaneuver him politically and strategically. We need a way to disrupt his entire command structure without firing a single shot. Lyra stepped closer, a hint of grudging admiration in her voice. And what does the human strategist propose as a non-lethal, politically devastating attack on the Silverfang Alpha? Information, Elias stated simply. Werewolf packs are based on absolute loyalty and a strict hierarchy. If we can prove that Thorn's own beta, Rylan, is undermining the Alpha's command, or even preparing to usurp him, the pack will tear itself apart internally. We don't fight the werewolves, we make them fight each other. Lyra considered this, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. A coup instigated by suggestion. Brilliant. But finding proof of Ryland's disloyalty in a secure pack compound is impossible, even for my spies. Not impossible, Elias corrected. Thorn's biggest flaw is his pride. He will bring his entire inner circle to the Midnight Council, including Ryland, to show his strength. He'll be focused on you. While he's preoccupied, Ryland will be exposed. Elias paused, looking directly at Lyra. But to pull this off, I need to be at that council. You need to be distracted, and I need access to their sensitive communications, which means I need to be close to Ryland during the council. I need to be your visible liability, distracting Thorn while I execute the actual strategy. Lyra's smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation. The Midnight Council is a hostile environment, Elias. The witches despise vampires and the werewolves will tear you apart simply for breathing. Corvus will be with us, but even he cannot guarantee your safety amidst 1,000 bloodthirsty lichens. I know the risk, Lyra, Elias insisted. But I'm the only one who understands the kind of human-grade communications interception needed for this plan. You gave me my life and my freedom. Now let me use them to secure your throne externally. I am your consort-in-choice, remember? I choose this danger. Lyra studied him, the decision costing her visible effort. She was wrestling between political necessity and her new, complicated sense of possessiveness over the human she had chosen. Finally she let out a slow, cold breath. Very well, Elias Vane. You will attend the Midnight Council. You will be my visible weakness and my secret weapon. Corvus will not leave your side, not for a second. If you die, this alliance ends and I will personally glass the Silverfang territory. Do you understand the severity of this mission? Understood, Elias confirmed, a surge of familiar adrenaline hitting him. The thrill of being on the edge was exactly why he had stayed. Good. Now we plan the infiltration. We need specialized gear, Elias. You may be human, but you must be prepared to survive the darkest night of the supernatural world. Preparation for the Midnight Council was unlike anything Elias had ever experienced. It was a fusion of ancient Coven resourcefulness and cutting-edge human technology. Lyra demanded absolute perfection, knowing that a single mistake would cost Elias his life and her Coven a disastrous war. Elias was brought to the Coven's hidden armory, a dark, temperature-controlled vault beneath the estate. It was here that Corvus took over his specialized training. The ghoul was the ultimate survivalist, capable of moving through the supernatural world's deadliest battlefields unnoticed. You are going into a den of wolves, Corvus stated, his voice a low growl, as he handed Elias a vest made of an impossible lightweight polymer. Your speed is 0. Your strength is irrelevant. Your defense is awareness. Corvus subjected Elias to 2 full days of brutal conditioning, teaching him basic supernatural survival skills. How to identify a lichen scent trail, how to use sound to distract an apex predator, and most crucially how to endure pain. He wasn't training Elias to fight, but to survive long enough for Corvus to intervene. The lichen alpha, Thorn, will try to provoke you to test the princess's commitment, Corvus instructed, his expression fixed. Your response must be measured. Any hint of fear or weakness will invite attack. The princess's power must be your shield. Meanwhile, Lyra provided the technological edge. She presented Elias with a custom-designed array of espionage gear. This is the Spectre unit, Lyra explained, holding up a pair of simple-looking cufflinks. They are microprocessors connected to an ultra-encrypted network. They can intercept and filter the electromagnetic signatures from leaking-grade communication devices. Your goal, Elias, is to get close enough to Rylan, Thorn's beta, to capture his internal pack transmissions. Werewolves rely on radio and localized digital feeds for covert operations. Lyra then fitted Elias with a custom-tailored suit that was much more than mere clothing. The material contains interwoven fibers designed to absorb small-caliber impacts and, more importantly, a magical repellent against low-level enchantments. It won't stop a full power blast, but it will buy Corvus precious seconds. The most significant piece of preparation, however, was psychological. Lyra spent hours with Elias, not discussing strategy but discussing deception. The Coven knows we are not in love, Lyra admitted, her red eyes intense. But they must believe we are inseparable. Your conviction must be absolute. Thorn will target your perceived vulnerability. You must look at me, Elias, as if I am the only stability you have in this chaotic existence. Show them that choosing this danger with me is the only choice you ever wanted. One night, Lyra brought Elias into her private sanctuary, a circular room where a permanent, powerful anti-magic barrier hummed. I have done everything possible to protect you, Lyra confessed, her voice softer than usual. But there is a residual threat from Kale's loyalists. They may try to use the Council's chaos to strike at you, proving Leakin's strength isn't the only problem. She walked toward him, her movement elegant and deliberate. She stopped right in front of him, closing the small gap between them. I need you to understand what this means, Elias. This is not a game. If you fail, I lose my strategic mind and my anchor. And I will not tolerate that loss. Lyra reached up, her hand gently tracing the line of his jaw. This time there was no political calculation, only raw, possessive sincerity. I gave you freedom and you returned to the flame. I will ensure that flame never consumes you. And then she kissed him. It was a cold kiss, lacking the warmth of a human embrace, but utterly consuming in its intensity, a kiss of power, loyalty, and a dangerous, desperate intimacy forged in shared secrets and constant peril. It was a vow made not under the blood moon, but under the shield of ancient, protective magic. Remember that, Elias, Lyra murmured, pulling back just enough for their eyes to meet. That is the price of your survival and the promise of my throne. Do not disappoint me. Elias, momentarily breathless, felt the weight of her promise. He wasn't just Lyra's advisor, he was her most prized, fragile possession, and her loyalty to him was now absolute. The Coven was about to learn that threatening the princess's choice was the quickest way to eternal damnation. The journey to the Midnight Council was undertaken in a specialized, armored coach designed to mimic an ordinary luxury vehicle, a necessary deception when traversing territories controlled by hostile supernatural factions. Lyra sat opposite Elias, her attire less ceremonial and more tactical, dark leather and reinforced silk accentuating her lethal grace. Corvus, his massive form perpetually still, occupied the jump seat, his presence a heavy, comforting shield. The atmosphere inside the coach was thick with the silent understanding of the stakes. The target location was a remote valley in the disputed borderlands, a neutral zone magically maintained by the ancient Mistsong Coven of Witches. The Mistsong witches hate us all equally, which makes them excellent referees, Lyra explained, her voice low. Their only law is balance. They will not allow open bloodshed, but they will allow, and even encourage, political duels and psychological warfare. Elias adjusted the hidden Spectre unit cufflinks, checking the encryption. My primary target is Ryland's communication frequency. I need to isolate the channel he uses to talk to the Silverfang scouts. If I can find evidence of him withholding information from Thorn, it's enough to trigger the internal power struggle. Thorn will be watching you, Elias, Lyra warned. He expects you to be a liability, a clumsy human who will distract me. Play the part perfectly. Act like the besotted fool, utterly reliant on my presence. But beneath that exterior you will be my eyes and my ears. As the coach neared the valley, the air grew colder and strangely damp. A thick, unnatural mist, saturated with old magic, rolled over the landscape. When they stepped out, the silence was overwhelming. The council ground was a clearing dominated by a single monolithic black stone altar. Around it, various delegations had already gathered, standing in tense, hostile clusters. The Lycans, led by the huge, muscular Alpha Kieran Thorn, were an intimidating wall of muscle and feral energy, their eyes constantly assessing the new arrivals. The Alpha's gaze settled instantly on Elias, a look of pure, primal contempt. Elias instinctively slipped his hand into Lyra's. It was a conscious performance for the assembled audience. Lyra's fingers wrapped around his, a cold, reassuring grip that was half affection, half command. Corvus positioned himself precisely half a pace behind Elias, an immovable shadow. "Ah, the Vasilios princess," Thorn boomed, his voice carrying easily across the clearing, thick with mock deference. "And she brings her trinket. I see you still cling to your mortal weakness, Lyra. You dare bring a creature who smells of death and fear into a gathering of the ancient blood?" Lyra stepped forward, her regal poise unchallenged. "Alpha Thorn. I bring a strategist who exposed the treason of your former ally, Elder Kale. Elias Vane is my chosen consort-in-choice. His presence signifies that the Vasilios rule is one of intellect over brute force. Something your pack, I imagine, rarely understands." Thorn scoffed, but Lyra's defense had the desired effect. It reframed Elias's presence from a liability to a deliberate, strategic choice. Elias maintained his role, leaning slightly toward Lyra, his gaze fixed on her with feigned, intense devotion. He used the distraction to quickly scan the werewolf delegation. There he was, Rylan, the beta, standing slightly apart from the alpha, his eyes watchful and calculating. The council meeting officially began, chaired by the mistress of the Missong Coven, a wizened witch whose power was undeniable. As Lyra engaged Thorn in a fierce, public debate over border rights and treaty interpretations, a distraction engineered by Elias put his plan into action. He excused himself, citing a sudden mortal indisposition, a move designed to look like human weakness. Corvus moved with him, a constant, intimidating escort. Elias walked toward the periphery of the Leakin cluster, keeping his distance but maximizing the range of the Spectre unit. He positioned himself near a cluster of ancient, moss-covered stones, making a show of feeling unwell. The Lycans ignored him, dismissing him as weak, which was exactly the reaction Elias needed. He activated the cufflinks. The tiny processors began sweeping the area, filtering out the constant magical interference and Leakin pack chatter, focusing on the localized, digital channels the werewolves used for coordinated movements. He saw Rylan move away from Thorn to issue a quiet, coded command on a handheld device. A routine communication with a patrol unit. The Spectre unit flashed a notification. Channel acquired. Elias began downloading the last 24 hours of Rylan's secure transmissions. The data streamed across the microscopic screen embedded in his watch. He had the opportunity, now he just needed the proof. Suddenly, a massive black-furred Leakin, one of Thorn's most trusted guards, detached from the group and slowly advanced on Elias. The guard didn't transform, but his eyes glowed gold with predatory intent. "The Alpha says the air is polluted, human," the Leakin growled, his voice a deep rumble. "Perhaps you should leave the sacred ground." Corvus stepped directly in front of Elias, his body a silent, granite wall. "The Consort-in-Choice is under the protection of the Vasilios throne. You will stand down." The tension was immediate. The Leakin was ready to fight, but facing Corvus, a Coven executioner known to regenerate from catastrophic damage, was suicide. The Leakin spat on the ground near Elias's feet, a clear gesture of disrespect, but backed off. Elias, despite the cold sweat on his back, maintained his pose of passive exhaustion. The download bar on his watch crept to 98%. He felt Lyra's gaze on him from the distance, a searing mixture of political anxiety and personal concern. 100% complete. Elias had the data. The proof of Rylan's treachery hidden within his logistical reports was now secure. He subtly deactivated the Spectre unit. He had survived the Leakin's aggression, gained the intelligence and maintained the deception. He turned to Corvus, a spark of exhilaration in his eyes. "We have what we came for. Now let's go give the princess the weapon she needs to end this war." Elias, flanked by Corvus, moved quickly through the hostile environment of the council clearing, returning to Lyra's side. He didn't speak, he simply slid the encrypted watch to Lyra, his eyes conveying the urgency of the acquired data. Lyra's public debate with Alpha Kieran Thorn continued, but as she subtly glanced at the microscopic screen, the transformation was instantaneous. Her initial political annoyance hardened into glacial, lethal focus. Elias had delivered the weapon, now she would fire it. "Alpha Thorn," Lyra declared, her voice suddenly cutting through the diplomatic chatter. "We have wasted enough time discussing the semantics of ancient borders. I propose we address the real threat to stability, treachery within your own command structure. Thorn, large and arrogant, laughed dismissively. Treachery? The Vasilios Coven breeds rats and spies, princess, not the Silverfang pack. Our loyalty is absolute. Is it alpha? Lyra challenged, her red eyes locking onto his. My consort-in-choice, Elias Vane, uncovered the rot during his brief observation of your camp. He, the mortal whom you constantly underestimate, found the proof that your very authority is being undermined by a power-hungry subordinate. She activated the Spectre unit's projection feature. The small watch, linked to a subtle magical artifact in her gown, projected the intercepted communications onto the ancient, black altar in the center of the clearing. The image was simple but devastating, a coded digital feed displaying Ryland's internal messages to various high-ranking pack scouts. This is the communication log from your beta, Ryland, over the last 48 hours, Lyra announced, addressing the entire council, the Mist-Song witches, the Lycans, and the other observing factions. It shows Ryland deliberately diverting Silverfang border patrols away from the Vasilios-controlled trade routes, not to attack us, but to protect his personal undeclared smuggling operations that use those very routes. A roar of confusion and anger erupted from the Silverfang pack. Ryland, the beta, turned pale, his eyes wide with betrayal. You lie, vampire. Thorn bellowed, his massive hands clenching into fists. Ryland's loyalty is ironclad. Loyalty? Lyra mocked, her voice filled with chilling contempt. Ryland diverted patrols to allow his human contacts to traffic illegal magical goods through Vasilios territory. He did not challenge my rule, Alpha. He challenged yours. He risked a massive border war with my coven, not to serve his Alpha, but to line his own pockets and establish an independent power base. He was positioning himself to challenge your Alpha claim once you were weakened by a conflict with us. Lyra's evidence was irrefutable. Werewolf politics were brutal. The sin wasn't ambition, but betrayal of the Alpha's trust and the exposure of the pack's weaknesses to an external enemy. Ryland had done both. The Silverfang pack was tearing itself apart. The loyalty-based hierarchy was instantly shattered. The high-ranking members of the pack, seeing the digital proof, turned their furious golden eyes away from Lyra and onto the terrified Ryland. Alpha Thorn, facing the instantaneous collapse of his command and the public humiliation before the entire supernatural world, was forced to make a decisive move to save his own leadership. Ryland. Thorn roared, his transformation beginning. Muscle swelling, bone cracking, his humanity dissolving into the massive, savage form of a true Lycan. You have betrayed the pack. You have disgraced the Silverfang name. Ryland tried to flee, but a dozen furious Lycans tackled him, dragging him away from the council grounds and into the surrounding mist. The sounds of a brutal, internal purge faded quickly. Lyra had achieved her goal. The Silverfang threat was neutralized not by war, but by a catastrophic, self-inflicted civil war triggered by Elias's intelligence. Lyra turned back to the assembled council, her face a mask of absolute triumph. The Vasilios Coven prioritizes stability and truth. We do not tolerate treachery within our ranks, nor should you. Let this be a lesson to all. The power of the throne is absolute, and its intelligence is limitless. She looked directly at Elias, offering him a small, possessive nod, a public display of their shared victory. Elias returned her gaze, feeling the rush of adrenaline and the profound satisfaction of having outmaneuvered the strongest warrior in the room with nothing but his mind and Lyra's ruthless support. The mistress of the Mist-Song witches, visibly shaken by the abrupt and decisive end to the conflict, quickly adjourned the council. As they walked back to the armored coach, leaving the chaos and the fading sounds of the Silverfang purge behind, Elias finally broke the silence. A political masterpiece, Lyra. The Silverfang pack will be busy dealing with their internal struggles for a decade. The threat is contained. Lyra reached out, taking his hand again, but this time the gesture was purely intimate, not performative. It was your move, Elias, Lyra conceded, her voice holding a rare mix of pride and intensity. You were my weakness and you became my greatest strength. You faced down 1,000 Lycans, a treacherous beta, and a hostile council, armed only with your intellect. I am indebted to you. We are partners, Lyra, Elias reminded her. Your throne is my survival. My next priority must be ensuring the security of Seraphina and her sanctuary. Kale's remaining loyalists will know that I am the key to her protection. They will not stop looking for a way to use her against you. Lyra's grip tightened, her red eyes darkening with protective resolve. Then we return to the estate. The next phase of this war is personal, Elias. We will build a fortress around that child, and we will eliminate every shadow that dares to approach her lineage. You and I together. For the eternity of my reign. The urgency to fortify the Seraph's sanctuary was paramount. With Elder Kale confined and Alpha Thorn neutralized, the remaining threats were insidious: fragmented loyalists of the old regime, black market operators who feared Lyra's clean sweep, and most dangerous of all, those within the Coven who still saw Seraphina's mere existence as an existential threat. Lyra, Elias, and Corvus traveled to the sanctuary under the cover of a dense, magically cloaked Coven security detail. The sanctuary was located deep within a major city, cleverly disguised as a non-profit hospital for children with rare, debilitating illnesses. Its true purpose, a secure, magically shielded prison/sanctuary for Damphir and human descendants of the Vasilios line, was known only to a few, including the now imprisoned Silas Thorn, who had managed its day-to-day operations. The moment they entered, the contrast was stark. Lyra's world was Gothic stone and ancient power. The sanctuary was bright, sterile, and filled with the low hum of advanced medical equipment and the sounds of children's fragile, human laughter. Seraphina was a surprisingly cheerful girl of about 10, confined to a wheelchair due to her illness. Her striking silver-white hair and deep, intelligent eyes, a softer shade of red than Lyra's, were an undeniable genetic link to the Vasilios lineage. She was currently engrossed in a video game, seemingly unaware of the deadly politics swirling around her. Elias was immediately struck by the fierce, cold protectiveness radiating from Lyra as she observed the child. Lyra did not approach; she kept her distance, honoring her oath to Alara to let the child live a quiet, mortal life. Her illness is genetic, a slow deterioration of the nervous system, likely amplified by the distant vampire genetics, Lyra explained to Elias, her voice low and clinical. Thorn secured the best human medical team, entirely unaware of the magical nature of their patient. My role is to maintain the illusion and provide the ultimate, magical defense. The sanctuary is hidden, but not invincible, Elias observed, reviewing the building schematics. The magical shielding is impressive, but vulnerable to high-grade targeted energy blasts, the kind a desperate Kale loyalist or a rogue witch Coven might employ. We need a purely physical countermeasure. Elias spent the next week transforming the sanctuary's infrastructure. He installed layers of human-grade security, military-spec facial recognition, seismic alarms, and a high-tech monitoring system that bypassed the Coven's outdated network. His unique human insight was creating a fortress that defended itself against both magic and mundane intrusion, a blend the supernatural world rarely anticipated. Corvus, meanwhile, worked on the magical defenses, layering the human security with Vasilios wards and ghoul patrols. He was the perfect physical manifestation of Lyra's protective will. During this intense period, the lines between Lyra's political dependency on Elias and her growing personal affection for him blurred further. One night, while reviewing blueprints in Seraphina's quiet observation room, Lyra leaned her head against Elias's shoulder, a gesture that had become a hallmark of their strange intimacy. "I promised Alara a mortal life for her line," Lyra whispered, her voice tinged with the ancient weariness of her race. "But I realize now, the safest life for any Vasilios is one defined by absolute power and unwavering defense. Your humanity is flawed, Elias, fragile. But your loyalty is absolute, and your mind is the sharpest weapon I possess." Elias tilted his head, letting his lips brush the cold silk of her hair. "My loyalty is to you, Lyra. And through you to the child you protect. My life is on the line because I want this world to be stable, for you to be stable. We are tied together by choice and by Seraphina's existence." Lyra turned, her eyes reflecting the complex feelings she rarely allowed herself to show. She was a creature of ancient command, yet she sought emotional grounding from the very thing she was supposed to dominate. "Then tell me, Consort-in-Choice," Lyra murmured, the title now sounding less political and more intimately possessive. "If the choice is always danger, where is the reward?" Elias smiled, a calm, genuine expression that contrasted sharply with her intense vampiric gaze. "The reward, Lyra, is waking up next to the most powerful creature in the world, knowing I'm the only one who truly understands the weight of your crown. And knowing that, for the first time in centuries, you trust someone not because they're immortal but because they're human." Lyra's breath caught, a rare human reaction. She didn't offer a political answer. She simply closed the distance, her kiss a deep, possessive claim that sealed their partnership in the silence of the magically defended room. Their work eventually paid off. The sanctuary became a layered fortress, a perfect blend of Elias's modern intelligence and Lyra's ancient magic. Seraphina was safer than any other life in the Coven. Elias had built the perfect defense for Lyra's most profound vulnerability. But just as they completed the final security protocols, a new threat emerged, one that had been hidden in the Coven's shadow for years. Marek, Lyra's centuries-old ghoul retainer, the one she swore was absolutely loyal, failed to report for his scheduled patrol. Elias and Lyra looked at each other, the same cold realization hitting them. Marek was the one person who knew every single detail of the sanctuary, Lyra's political vulnerabilities and Elias's personal routines. He was their security chief and he had vanished. Treason, Lyra stated, her voice flat with absolute fury. He knew Kale's every move and he helped me defeat him. But Marek served power, not me. Kale's remaining loyalists must have turned him, or offered him a power base I refused. He knows Serafina's location. Elias realized the gravity of the situation crashing down on him. And he knows all the Coven's weaknesses. We need to find him, Lyra. Immediately. He is the single greatest threat to everything we've built. The disappearance of Marek sent an icy chill through the Vasilios estate, a fear more profound than the downfall of Kale or the challenge of Thorn. Marek wasn't just a retainer, he was the Shadow Keeper, privy to 3 centuries of Vasilios secrets, security protocols, magical ward locations, private communication channels, and now the precise details of Elias's strategies and Serafina's location. Lyra's initial fury was cold and absolute, the silent kind of rage that precedes total destruction. She immediately convened a crisis meeting with Elias and Corvus in her war room. Marek did not act alone, Lyra stated, her voice dangerously level as she paced before the massive holographic map. He is driven by power, but he lacks the ambition to lead. He was bought. Kale's remaining loyalists, the Sartori family, are the likely buyers. They control the Coven's black market relics and magic trade. They want Serafina not for political leverage but for her rare, potent blood. Elias, tapping furiously at his console, confirmed the worst. Marek erased all digital footprints. But he had one non-negotiable routine, a specific, secure communications channel he used daily to talk to his ghoul network. He only spoke about mundane security details, but I found an anomaly, a single, coded transfer of coordinates 24 hours ago to an external, untraceable address. Where does it lead? Lyra demanded. It leads to a decommissioned textile factory in the heart of the city's industrial complex. The Red Spindle warehouse, Elias revealed, projecting the location onto the map. It's a perfect spot for the Sartori family. Deep underground tunnels, multiple exits and heavily insulated from magical detection. Marek is there, and he's almost certainly meeting the Sartori leadership to trade Coven secrets for his new position. Lyra looked at Corvus. Corvus, Marek was your contemporary. You know his fighting style. Can you contain him? Marek serves power, not loyalty, Corvus confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. He avoids direct conflict. He will use the factory's defenses and Sartori's mercenaries. I can contain him, Princess. But the Sartori family is the priority. Elias stepped in, the tactical command now falling to him. Lyra, we can't send a Coven military force. It would announce Serafina's vulnerability to the entire supernatural world. This has to be a surgical, covert strike. The 3 of us. Corvus handles the exterior perimeter and the Sartori guards. You handle Marek and the Sartori leadership. My job is to locate the exchange point and, if necessary, disable any magical or technological traps Marek has anticipated. Lyra's eyes softened, a flicker of appreciation for his tactical brilliance. A clean, decisive execution. Very well. We move now. This treason ends tonight. The drive to the Red Spindle warehouse was a tense blur. When they arrived, the warehouse was a hulking, silent monolith under the pale city lights, its windows dark and empty. Lyra, Elias, and Corvus approached the main entrance, a massive rusted steel door. Corvus moved first, applying his immense strength to the door. It shuddered, the ancient locking mechanisms groaning under the pressure. The defenses are old, but Marek will have supplemented them, Elias warned, pulling out a compact, sophisticated jamming device. He engaged the device, flooding the area with white noise that disrupted any local magical sensors Marek might have deployed. They slipped inside. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and forgotten machinery. The factory floor stretched into the darkness, filled with ominous shadows and decaying looms. Lyra moved with silent, predatory grace, her footsteps barely audible on the concrete. Elias moved methodically, scanning the environment with a specialized thermal imager. There below us, Elias whispered, pointing the imager towards a partially hidden hatch in the floor. 3 heat signatures in the tunnel below. Likely the Sartori leadership. And 1 larger signature near the far end of the floor. Marek. He's waiting for us. Suddenly, A loud, metallic clang echoed from the darkness. A barrage of heavy, steel netting, laced with electrical current, dropped from the rafters, aimed right at Lyra and Elias. Magical countermeasure. Elias yelled. He shoved Lyra hard, pushing them both out of the net's path just as it slammed into the floor, showering sparks. Marek's voice, amplified by the cavernous space, rang out, mocking and triumphant. Did you think I wouldn't anticipate the great princess of Vasilios and her clever mortal dog? The net was designed to paralyze Princess. But never mind. You will not stop the trade. Elias pulled Lyra close, the danger immediate and overwhelming. He knows our style, Lyra. He knows we move together. We need to split up. I'll head for the exit and cut off their escape route while you take Marek and the Sartori. Corvus, cover Lyra's flank and clear the tunnels. Lyra nodded, her red eyes burning with fighting fire. Move, Elias, and do not die. Lyra and Corvus vanished into the darkness, moving toward Marek's position. Elias, using his knowledge of the structure and his jamming device, moved toward the side service corridors. He knew Marek's plan: lure Lyra into a contained confrontation while the Sartori family escaped with the valuable information. Elias had to prevent the escape. He reached the heavy service door leading to the outside and began to quickly override the locking mechanism. Just as the door clicked open, a massive, muscular figure emerged from the shadows. Not a vampire, but a heavily armored Sartori mercenary, wielding a high-frequency sonic disruptor designed to paralyze human nervous systems. Elias, his adrenaline surging, knew this was a fight he couldn't win with brute force. He was alone, and his final test of survival had arrived. Elias had been trained by Corvus to survive, not to fight. But survival, he knew, often meant transforming a calculated risk into a decisive action. The Sartori mercenary blocking his exit was enormous, clad in thick, noise-dampening armor, and carried a sonic disruptor, a weapon designed to scramble the human nervous system into paralysis. Elias knew the battle wasn't about strength, it was about speed and information. "You're the human pet," the mercenary growled, his voice distorted by his helmet's modulator. "The Sartori said you'd be a quick kill. Too bad for you." As the mercenary raised the disruptor, Elias acted. He didn't run. He slammed his body against a stack of heavy rusted machine parts near the wall, triggering a massive echoing clang. At the same time, he hurled his jamming device at the wall nearest the mercenary's head. The jamming device didn't harm the mercenary, but it did two things. First, the sudden high-pitched screech of the jamming signal on the internal comms momentarily overwhelmed the mercenary's sensitive auditory enhancers. Second, the noise and the sudden metallic chaos covered Elias's true move. Elias dropped flat, rolling rapidly towards the mercenary's feet. The sonic disruptor fired, but the blast, focused on the height of a standing man, tore uselessly through the air where Elias had just been. Elias had been trained by Corvus in one thing: exploit the enemy's blind spots. The mercenary was designed for brute force and frontal assault. Still low to the ground, Elias grabbed a discarded heavy piece of iron piping, a blunt, pathetic weapon against armor. He didn't aim for the armor. He drove the pipe hard into the mercenary's unprotected knee joint. The mercenary let out a stifled roar of pain. The disruptor clattered to the floor as the man's massive frame tilted, his balance compromised. Elias scrambled back, grabbing the abandoned disruptor. He knew nothing about its controls, but he knew its single purpose. The mercenary, recovering quickly despite the searing pain, started to lunge for him. "Stay down," Elias yelled, pointing the disruptor's main barrel at the mercenary's chest. He stabbed a random button. The weapon didn't fire. Instead, a focused beam of red light flashed from the barrel. Elias, confused for a second, realized the weapon was not set to kill, but to tag. The beam hit the mercenary's chest armor, leaving a distinct, bright Vasilios Coven tracer mark, a calling card of Lyra's ownership. Elias tossed the useless weapon away. He had failed to neutralize the threat, but he had marked it. He had done his part to expose the Sartori operation. He looked up. Lyra and Corvus were battling Marek and the Sartori leaders in the deeper parts of the factory. He could hear the distinct sound of Corvus's blade against metal, muffled screams, and Lyra's low, cold commands. The mercenary, dragging his injured leg, lunged at Elias again, desperate to finish the easy kill. Suddenly, a streak of granite gray appeared in the corner of Elias's vision. Corvus, having secured the tunnels, had circled back. The ghoul moved past Elias, his short blade appearing and disappearing with impossible speed. The fight lasted less than 2 seconds. The mercenary, his armor untouched but his core nervous system instantly shut down, collapsed, his body twitching once before going still. Corvus didn't spare the body a glance. He looked at Elias, assessing his condition. "You are marked," Corvus stated, pointing to the red tracer mark on the mercenary's chest. "Good. The message is sent." He turned, motioning toward the deeper darkness. "The princess needs you now. Marek is using your strategies against her." Elias followed Corvus deeper into the factory, where the air was thick with the scent of ozone and the heavy metallic aroma of vampire magic. They found Lyra in a sub-level office, locked in a brutal standoff with Marek and the 3 Sartori leaders. The Sartori leaders were not fighters. They were magically powerful, controlling a vast network of black market relics. They had fortified the small office with hastily erected magical wards, flickering shields of green energy that repelled Lyra's direct attacks. Marek stood behind them, smug and calculating. "The Sartori will give me the influence I deserve, princess." Marek sneered, clutching a strange leather-bound book, likely containing the deepest Vasilios secrets. "You cling to archaic loyalties and a fragile mortal. I choose real power." "You choose oblivion, Marek," Lyra hissed, her voice laced with venom. Her red eyes scanned the room, looking for a weakness in the wards. "You know my strength. You cannot hold me here." "I know your style, princess," Marek countered triumphantly. "You rely on brute force. But the wards are set to disrupt vampire energy. Your strength will only fuel them." This was Marek's genius, using Elias's insight to predict Lyra's weakness, her overwhelming power. Elias realized the immediate threat. Marek hadn't built a magical defense. He had built a magical trap designed to nullify Lyra's primary advantage. He quickly scanned the small office space. The wards pulsed with Lyra's energy, but they were being powered by a single visible source. An old textile capacitor bank repurposed by the Sartori family into a powerful, temporary magical battery. "Lyra, the wards are not blocking you, they are consuming your energy. They are powered by the capacitor bank behind Marek." Elias yelled, pointing to the massive humming metal box. "Don't fight the magic. Destroy the power source." Lyra needed no second command. She understood the tactical shift instantly. She stopped her magical assault. Instead, with a move of devastating speed, she grabbed a heavy, broken beam of wood from the doorway and hurled it across the room with inhuman velocity. The wooden beam slammed into the ancient capacitor bank. The metal box sparked violently, exploding in a shower of brilliant blue electricity. The power source was gone. The Sartori wards instantly flickered, sputtered, and vanished. The Sartori leaders screamed in terror as their shield evaporated. Marek, realizing his end had come, scrambled to escape through a hidden panel in the wall. Lyra, fueled by righteous, personal fury, was faster. She intercepted the ghoul, seizing Marek by the throat with a grip of steel. "Treason against the Vasilios line is unforgivable, Marek," Lyra whispered, her voice colder than the grave. "But treason against my choice is a personal affront." With a final, sickening crunch, Lyra ended Marek's centuries-long life. The Sartori leaders, now completely defenseless, fell quickly to Corvus's silent efficiency. The threat was neutralized. The Coven was safe. Elias walked over to Lyra, who stood over the dead ghoul, her eyes still burning with the residual energy of the fight. "It's over, Lyra," Elias said softly, placing his hand on her bloodied shoulder. Lyra turned, grabbing his hand tightly. "It is over, Elias. You saved my life, my secrets, and my throne. Not with magic, but with the brilliance of your mortal mind. You are indispensable." Back at the Vasilios estate, the triumph was quiet but absolute. The Sartori family was dismantled, their assets seized, and their influence eradicated. Lyra's throne was now truly secure, domestically and externally. Elias, exhausted but satisfied, found Lyra waiting for him in their shared quarters. "The Coven is safe," Lyra confirmed, leaning against him, her head resting on his chest. "But you were almost killed by a stray mercenary, Elias. A simple human error in strategy." "I learned how to mark my target," Elias countered, smiling wryly. "And I learned that you rely on my insight more than your power. That's a powerful lesson for both of us." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes intense. "I have secured my realm and I have honored my promises. The Coven recognizes your worth. There are no political threats left. Your conditional freedom is now absolute. You can leave, Elias. You have earned a life far away from the blood and the darkness." Elias Vane, the human researcher who had been forcibly betrothed and then willingly chose the danger, smiled at the vampire queen. "And you, Lyra? Now that the wars are over and you are truly queen, what do you do with the endless solitude?" Lyra's smile was the most vulnerable expression she had ever shown. I have discovered, Elias Vane, that I no longer desire solitude. I desire coexistence. My reign may be eternal, but I choose to spend every precious, fragile second of your human life with you. Not as my shield but as my partner. She reached out, pulling him down into an embrace that was a blend of cold power and desperate, chosen intimacy. The human stays. By choice. And for however long your mortal life lasts, I will ensure it is filled with brilliance, challenge, and the secure knowledge that you are loved by the most powerful creature in this world. Elias Vane closed his eyes, accepting the dangerous, exhilarating reality. He had chosen the edge of the knife and now he had the queen. Months passed in deceptive tranquility after Marek's defeat. Lyra's reign, now known for its swift, brutal intelligence, was uncontested. The Coven thrived under the combined strategy of the Immortal Queen and her brilliant human Consort-in-Choice. Elias Vane was no longer a curiosity, he was a political force, the living proof that Lyra's reign was unbreakable. However, one threat remained, silent and deepening: Serafina's health. Her rare genetic illness, amplified by the dormant Vasilios blood, was accelerating. The sanctuary's human doctors were helpless. The illness was now reacting to the very magical wards designed to protect her. Lyra and Elias stood by Serafina's bedside in the sanctuary, the flickering light reflecting the fear in Lyra's red eyes, a vulnerability she showed only to Elias. The magic that shields her is consuming her, Lyra whispered, her voice rough with desperation. I cannot lower the shields or Kale's old enemies will strike. I promised Lyra a mortal life, but if I do nothing she will die. Elias took Lyra's cold hand. There must be a solution, Lyra. Something in the ancient Vasilios archives that deals with this blood contamination. There is, Lyra admitted, looking out the window at the setting sun. The Ethel Vow, a ritual of absolute transference. It requires a massive influx of pure magical energy to purge the toxic ancestral weakness from the descendants' blood and stabilize them. It would not turn Serafina into a full vampire, but it would grant her immunity and long-term stability. But the power required is almost impossible to generate. Just then the estate's main magical barrier shuddered violently, a focused, powerful assault from an external, non-leaken force. Lyra's private communicator flashed red. Corvus's gravelly voice cut through. Princess. The High Fae envoy has breached the external gates. They demand immediate audience. They reject the validity of your human Consort-in-Choice and demand Coven restructuring. The High Fae, the oldest and most magically powerful race, had finally made their move. They saw Lyra's unconventional rule as a gateway to seize influence. Lyra's mask of the queen snapped back into place. They timed their arrogance perfectly. They expect me to be weakened by the internal struggle. Elias, we must face them. But without the Ethel Vow, Serafina is doomed. Elias looked from the pale, sleeping child to the queen, recognizing the final, absolute choice. He knew his true purpose wasn't just to advise, but to be the source of absolute power when Lyra needed it most. I have the answer for the Ethel Vow, Lyra, Elias stated, his voice calm and firm. We don't need to generate the power. We need to use the vow to transfer power. What are you suggesting? Lyra demanded, her eyes wide with sudden comprehension. The vow requires the complete, willing transfer of energy from a source tied to the Vasilios bloodline. I am your Consort-in-Choice, Lyra. My life is chosen to be intrinsically linked to your throne, the source of Vasilios power. I am the necessary conduit. Elias stepped closer, reaching out to gently touch the silver hair on Lyra's head. You need a power source that cannot be depleted. My mortal life is finite, but my loyalty is absolute and pure. Use the Ethel Vow, Lyra. Use me as the focus to channel your own vast Vasilios energy into Serafina. You give her stability, and in doing so, you bind me to you in a way that transcends the mortal contract. He wasn't asking for immortality, he was asking for protection, a magical safeguard built into his very existence by the queen herself. Lyra looked at him, her face a storm of fear, love, and immense power. This is dangerous, Elias. If the transfer fails, you will be destroyed. I will not risk the end of my chosen anchor. You must, Elias insisted, meeting her gaze. The Fae are here. This is the only way to save Serafina and prove your ultimate power to them. Let the queen decide the fate of her line. Lyra, with a heartbreaking expression of commitment, agreed. They performed the quick, intense Ethel Vow ritual in the sanctuary's shielded medical bay. As Lyra channeled the vast, ancient energy of the Vasilios line through Elias, his mortal body shuddered, but he held fast, his focus entirely on the sleeping child. The power surged, purging the toxicity from Seraphina's blood, leaving her stable, healthy, and forever protected by the powerful magic of her queen. At the very end of the ritual, Lyra placed her hand over Elias's heart, a surge of protective magic sealing his own existence. He felt no change in his mortality, but he felt an intrinsic, magical warding, a powerful, permanent shield tied directly to Lyra's life force. He would remain human, but his chosen partner had ensured his safety was paramount. Lyra, exhausted but victorious, stood up and took Elias's hand. "It is done. Seraphina is safe. And you, my partner, are now magically bound to my protection forever." They walked out of the sanctuary and into the grand hall to face the high Fey envoy, who stood amidst his retinue, observing the coven with arrogant disdain. "Princess Vasilios," the Fey envoy sneered. "Your coven is tainted by mortals and your rule is a joke. We demand the child descendant as collateral, and the banishment of this human." Lyra stepped forward, radiating power unlike anything the coven had ever seen, the cold, absolute confidence of a queen who had just risked everything and won. "Your demands are void, envoy," Lyra declared, her voice ringing with finality. "My consort-in-choice, Elias Vane, is not a banishment. He is the key to my throne, and the source of the ultimate stability of my line. He just secured the safety of the Vasilios descendant against all internal threats, using the power I chose to grant him." Lyra looked at Elias, offering him a possessive, intimate smile, then turned back to the envoy. "The child is safe. My throne is secured by my choice, not your archaic rules. And as for my consort," Lyra finished, pulling Elias close, his continued human existence now a magical certainty. "He stays. Forever. You may take this message back to your queen. The Vasilios Empire is stronger than ever, and those who question my choice question my eternal reign. Now leave." The Fey envoy, recognizing the sheer, undeniable power and the successful defense of the line, bowed grudgingly and retreated. Lyra had won the last war. Lyra turned to Elias, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind deep, protective love. "The world is silent, Elias Vane. My throne is secure. You're safe. The wars are over." Elias smiled, looking at the queen who had gone from his captor to his life's partner. "The wars are never over, Lyra. But now we fight them together. For however long my life lasts." Lyra leaned in, her lips finding his in a cold, possessive kiss. A kiss that was a promise of loyalty, power, and a fiercely protected, chosen coexistence. He was still mortal, but he was hers, and his eternity was secured in her vigilant, powerful embrace.